I was driving by my son-in-law's house and decided to visit him, but when I saw my wife's car at the gate, I realized that something was wrong. I quietly approached the window, and what I heard inside rocked my world. I could not believe my ears because the woman I had shared my bed with for 40 years was planning my funeral. My name is Jerome, and I am 68 years old. I have spent my entire life working with my hands and my mind in the logistics industry, managing warehouses where a single mistake could cost millions. I learned to be quiet, I learned to observe, and I learned that the loudest person in the room is usually the one with the least power. For the past 5 years since my retirement, I have played the role of the simple old man taking care of his garden, driving an old Ford pickup, and letting my family believe I was just scraping by on a modest pension. They never knew about the heir's property in Georgia, 300 acres of prime timberland that had been in my family since Reconstruction. They never knew that as the sole executor, I had been quietly managing the timber rights, and that the land was now valued at over $4 million. I kept it secret because I wanted to see who my family really was without the filter of money. And today, standing outside that window, I finally saw their true faces. Before I tell you exactly what I heard and how I barely escaped with my life, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments. If you have ever discovered a secret that changed your entire life, I want to know I am not alone in this. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a day when my wife Maxine was supposed to be at her weekly prayer group meeting at the church. She had kissed me on the cheek that morning, handed me my coffee, and told me she would be back by dinner. I had decided to drive over to the upscale gated community where my daughter Candace and her husband Gavin lived. I had found a vintage electric train set at a flea market, the kind my grandson Tyler loved, and I wanted to drop it off as a surprise. My 2005 Ford F-150 rattled as I pulled up to the security gate of Willow Creek Estates. The guard knew me and waved me through, looking at my rusted truck with that familiar mix of pity and disdain that I had grown used to. I drove slowly, admiring the manicured lawns and the massive houses that looked more like museums than homes. Gavin, my son-in-law, was a real estate agent who loved to flash his wealth. He drove a Porsche, wore Italian suits, and always spoke to me as if he were explaining quantum physics to a toddler. As I approached their driveway, I prepared to park on the street so my oil-leaking truck would not stain their pristine pavers. But then I slammed on the brakes. Parked discreetly behind a row of tall hedges was a Buick LaCrosse. It was beige, practical, and unmistakable. It was Maxine's car. My heart skipped a beat. Why was she here? She was supposed to be on the other side of town praying for the salvation of souls. Was she sick? Had something happened to Candace? I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment. The silence of the neighborhood was heavy. My instincts, the same instincts that had saved me from falling crates and forklift accidents back in the warehouse, started screaming at me. Something was wrong. I did not go to the front door. I did not ring the bell. Instead, I grabbed the box with the train set and walked quietly across the grass, hugging the line of decorative bushes that surrounded the house. I moved like a ghost, despite my bad knee. I made my way to the back patio where Gavin had his outdoor office. The weather was nice, so the large bay windows were open just a crack, covered only by a thin screen. I heard laughter. It was not the joyous laughter of family. It was the cold, sharp laughter of conspirators. I froze, pressing my back against the brick wall. I recognized Gavin's voice immediately, arrogant and smooth. He said, "That old mule is stubborn, Maxine. He is never going to sign that. Power of attorney voluntarily. I have tried being nice. I have tried scaring him about his health. Nothing works. He just stares at me with those blank eyes." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. He was talking about me. Old mule. That is what he called me behind my back. Then I heard a voice that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. "It was Maxine," she replied. "Don't worry, Gavin. He trusts me. He thinks I am his guardian angel. I have already started switching his blood pressure medication with the sugar pills, and starting tomorrow, I am adding the special drops you gave me to his morning coffee." My hands started to shake so violently that I almost dropped the train set. Special drops, switching my medication. The headaches I had been having for the last 2 weeks, the dizziness, the blurred vision. I thought it was just old age catching up with me. But it was her. It was the woman I had built a life with. Gavin laughed again, the sound of ice cracking, he said. How long until it takes full effect I have? Investors breathing down my neck. Maxine, I need to liquidate that Georgia land before the fiscal year ends. If we don't get control of his assets by November, I am finished. Maxine's voice dropped lower, but it was still clear and cold. She said, just be patient. The arsenic is low dose. It mimics natural cognitive decline. By Thanksgiving, he will be so confused and weak that we can have him declared incompetent without anyone raising an eyebrow. Dr. Albright is already on board to sign the papers once the symptoms show. Then you get the power of attorney. We sell the land and we split the proceeds just like we agreed. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Arsenic. My wife was poisoning me with arsenic. Not for hate, not for revenge, but for land, for dirt. She knew about the land. She must have found the old deeds I had hidden in the attic years ago. She had never said a word. She had just waited, plotted, and now she was executing. I stood there, the cool brick pressing against my spine, trying to remember how to breathe. My wife and my white son-in-law were conspiring to kill me slowly, to make me lose my mind so they could sell my heritage to pay off his debts. I thought about my daughter Candace. Where was she? Was she part of this? Gavin spoke again, answering my silent question, asking, what about Candace? She is going to ask questions if her father suddenly turns into a vegetable. Maxine scoffed, a sound of pure dismissal. She said, Candace is working double shifts at the hospital. She is too exhausted to notice anything. Besides, she does whatever you tell her. Gavin, you handle your wife and I will handle the old man. Once he is in the nursing home and the money is in our accounts, Candace will be grateful we secured her future. They had planned everything. My daughter was just a pawn. My life was just an obstacle, and my death was their payday. I realized I was holding my breath. My chest hurt. A rage I had never known began to boil in my veins, replacing the shock I wanted to burst through. That window and wrap my hands around Gavin's throat. I wanted to scream at Maxine, asking her how she could sleep next to me every night while planning my murder, but I knew I could not. I was a 68-year-old black man in a gated community standing in the backyard of a wealthy white man. If I attacked him, I would be the one going to jail or the morgue, and they would win. I had to be smarter. I had to be the Jerome who managed logistics, who saw the whole board, who anticipated the bottlenecks I had to survive. I took a step back, intending to retreat to my truck and drive straight to the police station. But in my anger, I was careless. My boot came down on a dry, decorative branch hidden in the mulch. Crack! The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. The voices inside stopped instantly. Shh! Did you hear that? Gavin hissed. I threw myself flat against the ground, rolling under the large elevated wooden deck that extended from the patio. It was a tight squeeze, dark and smelling of damp earth and rot. I pulled the box with the train set against my chest and held my breath. I heard the sliding glass door open. Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel right above my head. "Who is there?" Gavin shouted. His voice was not smooth anymore. It was edged with panic. I could see his expensive loafers through the slats of the deck wood. He was standing just inches from where I lay, hidden. Dust fell onto my face, but I did not blink. I did not move. "Maybe it was a raccoon," Maxine said from the doorway, her voice trembling slightly, "or the neighbor's cat." "Come back inside, Gavin. You are being paranoid." Gavin walked to the edge of the patio, peering into the yard. I saw him pull something from his waistband. It was a gun, a small chrome pistol. He was armed. He was ready to kill to protect his secret. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying to a God I thought had abandoned me. If he looked down, if he bent over just a little bit, he would see me, and he would shoot me, claiming I was an intruder, a trespasser, justifiable. Self-defense. I saw a squirrel dart across the lawn, climbing up the oak tree. "There, look, Gavin. It was just a squirrel," Maxine called out. "Let's finish this. I need to get home before Jerome returns. I have to prepare his dinner." Gavin stood there for 10 more seconds, seconds that felt like hours. Finally, he grunted and turned around. "Damn rodents," he muttered. He walked back inside and slid the glass door shut, locking it with a heavy thud. I lay in the dirt under the deck for another 20 minutes, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I waited until I heard the front door open and close. I waited until I heard the engine of Maxine's Buick start up and fade into the distance. Only then did I crawl out. My clothes were covered in dust and spiderwebs. My knees ached, my hands were scraped, but I was alive. I walked back to my truck, my legs feeling like lead. I threw the train set onto the passenger seat, looking at the innocent picture of the locomotive on the box. The toy was for a grandchild I might never see grow up if I didn't act fast. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. The face staring back was not the same man who had driven here an hour ago. That man was a husband, a father, a grandfather. The man looking back now was a target. I started the truck. The engine roared to life, spitting a cloud of black smoke. I drove out of Willow Creek Estates, passing the security guard who didn't even look up. I couldn't go to the police yet. It was my word against theirs. They were respected members of the community. I was just a retired old man complaining about his wife giving him vitamins without proof, without a toxicology report. They would just call it a domestic dispute, or worse, a sign of the dementia Maxine was already claiming. I had to go home. I had to go back to the house where my executioner was waiting for me. I realized with a chilling clarity that I had to play their game. I had to pretend I didn't know, I had to drink the coffee, or I had to let them think they were winning, while I gathered the evidence to bury them. I drove home, my mind racing faster than the truck. Maxine would be there waiting, with a smile and a poisoned meal. I pulled into my driveway. The Buick was already parked perfectly in its spot. I turned off the engine and took a deep breath, composing my face, masking the terror and the rage. I walked to the front door. I opened it, and the smell of pot roast hit me. It was my favorite meal. Or it had been. "Honey, is that you, Maxine?" called out from the kitchen, her voice sweet and loving, the voice of a woman who had shared my life for 4 decades. "I'm home, dear," I called back, my voice steady, betraying nothing. I walked into the kitchen. She was standing by the stove wearing her floral apron, stirring a pot. She turned to me and smiled, and for the first time I saw the shark behind the eyes. "How was your day?" she asked, walking over to kiss me. I let her kiss my cheek, fighting the urge to recoil. It was quiet. I lied. Just a quiet, boring day. She smiled again and handed me a glass of iced tea. "Here, drink this. You look parched. It is hot outside." I looked at the glass. The ice clinked softly, condensation running down the sides. It looked refreshing. It looked deadly. "Thank you," I said, taking the glass. I raised it to my lips, watching her watch me. Her eyes were locked on the glass, hungry, expectant. I knew then that the war had begun, and I, Jerome Blackwell, was not going to be the casualty. I was going to be the survivor. I pretended to take a sip, but I kept my lips tight, letting the liquid touch them, but not enter. Then I lowered the glass and smiled back at her. "Dinner smells great, Maxine," I said. She turned back to the stove, satisfied. I poured the tea into the potted plant by the window when she looked away. The game was on, and they had no idea who they were playing against. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen curtains, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor that I had laid down with my own hands 20 years ago. It was a beautiful Wednesday morning, the kind of day that makes you glad to be alive, unless you know that your wife is trying to kill you before lunch. I sat at the small round table pretending to read the newspaper, but my eyes were fixed on the reflection in the toaster oven. I watched Maxine moving near the coffee maker. She was humming a gospel song, Amazing Grace. Her hips swayed slightly to the rhythm, and she looked for all the world like the devoted wife of 4 decades preparing breakfast for her husband. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. If I had not been hiding under that deck yesterday, if I had not heard her promise Gavin that she would handle the old man, I would have believed it. I would have smiled and thanked God for a woman who loved me. But I knew better. Now I watched the reflection as she reached into the pocket of her housecoat. She pulled out a small amber vial. It happened in a split second. She uncapped it and squeezed 3 drops into my mug. The dark liquid vanished into the black coffee, leaving no trace. She stirred it with a spoon, clinking the ceramic sides cheerfully. Then she capped the vial and slid it back into her pocket. She turned around with a bright smile, holding the mug in both hands. "Here you go, Jerome," she said, placing it in front of me. "Drink it while it is hot. You need your strength." The steam rose from the cup, carrying the rich aroma of roasted beans masked by the scent of betrayal. I looked at the black liquid swirling in the mug. It looked innocent. It looked like the same coffee I had drunk every morning for 40 years. But now I knew it was a weapon. "Thank you, Maxine," I said, my voice raspy. I tried to keep my hand from trembling as I reached for the handle. She stood there hovering. Her hand rested on the back of my chair, her fingers tapping lightly. She was waiting, watching. She needed to see me take that first sip. She needed to know the poison was inside me, working its magic, destroying my mind so they could steal my land. A war raged inside my chest. Part of me wanted to stand up and smash the mug against the wall, screaming that I knew everything. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake the truth out of her. But the logical part of me, the part that had managed complex supply chains and navigated corporate politics without a college degree, told me to stop. If I confronted her now, she would deny it. She would say it was sweetener or vitamins. She would call the police and say I was having an episode, proving her claim that I was losing my mind. I had to be smarter. I had to buy time. I lifted the mug toward my lips. My heart hammered against my ribs loud enough that I feared she could hear it. The heat of the coffee warmed my face. Maxine leaned in closer, her eyes wide and expectant. Suddenly I gasped and grabbed my chest, letting the mug tilt dangerously in my hand. "What is it, Jerome?" she asked, her voice spiking with fake alarm. I felt a sharp pain. I lied, grimacing. "It is probably just indigestion form, that late dinner." I slammed the mug down on the table, intentionally hitting the edge hard enough to slosh coffee over the rim. "Oh, shoot, look at that," I said clumsily. "I made a mess." Maxine sighed, but her eyes remained cold. "Let me get a rag," she said, turning toward the sink. The moment her back was turned, I moved with a speed I did not know I still possessed. I grabbed the mug and poured the entire contents into the large potted fern that sat on the windowsill next to the table. The dark liquid soaked into the soil, instantly vanishing. I set the empty mug back on the table just as Maxine turned around. With the wet rag, I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, pretending to swallow. "I feel a bit better now," I said. "Thanks for the coffee, Maxine. It was just what I needed." She looked at the empty mug and a satisfied smile spread across her face. "Good," she said, wiping the table. "You finish up, I am going. To the store, I will be back in an hour." She kissed my forehead. A Judas kiss. Then she grabbed her purse and walked out the door, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the empty mug and the poisoned fern. I sat there for a long time, listening to the silence of the house. My head was throbbing. It was a dull, persistent ache right behind my eyes that I had been ignoring for weeks. I had attributed it to stress, to aging, to the fact that I needed new glasses. But now, sitting in the morning light with the knowledge of what was in that vial, I began to connect the dots. I pulled my smartphone from my pocket. It was an older model with a cracked screen, but it worked fine. I opened the browser and typed in a search query, "symptoms of arsenic poisoning." The results loaded, and as I scrolled down the list, a cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. Headaches, check. Dizziness, check. I had almost fallen in the garden last week, blaming my bad knee. Blurred vision, check. Metallic taste in the mouth. I ran my tongue over my teeth. There it was, subtle but undeniable. A taste like I had been sucking on a copper penny. I had thought it was a side effect of my blood pressure medication. But Maxine handled my medication. She sorted the pills every Sunday into the little plastic organizer marked with the days of the week. I stood up, my legs feeling heavy, and walked to the bathroom cabinet. I found the organizer and popped open the compartment for Tuesday. Inside were 2 white pills and 1 blue one. They looked identical to the ones I had been taking for years. But looks can be deceiving, just like wives. I took out one of the white pills and crushed it on the countertop. It turned into a fine powder. Usually my blood pressure meds were hard to crush, coated to dissolve slowly in the stomach. This was chalky. It was sugar. It was a placebo. She had been switching my real medication with sugar pills, allowing my blood pressure to spike, causing the headaches and dizziness. And on top of that, she was adding the arsenic to my coffee. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back at me looked tired. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin slightly gray. I wasn't just getting old, I was being murdered slowly, systematically, day by day in my own home by the people who were supposed to love me. The realization hit me harder than any physical blow. It wasn't just greed, it was hatred. You have to hate someone, to watch them deteriorate, to watch them suffer and smile while you hand them the poison. I washed the powder down the sink and gripped the edge of the vanity. I am not dying today, I whispered to my reflection. I am not dying tomorrow. You picked the wrong old man to kill. Maxine. I heard the rumble of a car engine in the driveway. It wasn't Maxine's Buick. It was a deeper, throaty sound. I looked out the bathroom window and saw a silver BMW convertible pulling up. It was Gavin. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his expensive sunglasses, looking like he owned the world. He carried a leather briefcase and walked with a swagger that made my fists itch. He was here to check on his investment. He was here to see if the old mule was ready to break. I went back to the living room and sat in my recliner, forcing my body to relax, forcing my face into a mask of weary confusion. I had to play the part. The front door opened without a knock. "Hey, Pop," Gavin called out, his voice booming. "You home in here, Gavin?" I answered, making my voice sound weak and tremulous. He walked into the living room, bringing the smell of expensive cologne and arrogance with him. He looked me up and down, scanning for signs of weakness, for signs that the poison was working. "You look tired, Pop," he said, sitting on the sofa opposite me, untucking his trousers at the knees to preserve the crease. "Rough night?" "Just old age, son," I said, rubbing my temples. "Just these headaches. They do not seem to go away." Gavin nodded sympathetically. A shark smiling at a seal. "That is a shame, Pop. Really a shame. Listen, since you are not feeling up to par, I wanted to help you out with some of the boring stuff." He placed the briefcase on his lap and clicked it open. He pulled out a thick document stapled at the top. The paper was crisp and white, contrasting with the dark intentions behind it. "What is that?" I asked, squinting at it. "It is just some insurance paperwork, Pop," Gavin said smoothly. "You know, for the house and the car." With you not feeling well, Maxine thought it would be better if I handled the renewals and the payments, so you do not have to worry about deadlines or fine print. It is just a standard form. He held it out to me along with a gold pen. I took the document. My hands shook slightly, not from age but from the effort of not strangling him. I looked at the header. It did not say insurance, renewal. It said durable power of attorney in bold black letters. "This lets you handle the insurance?" I asked, playing dumb. "Everything," Pop Gavin said, leaning forward, his eyes intense. "It lets me handle everything. The bills, the bank accounts, the property taxes. I can make sure everything is paid on time so you can just relax and get better. You trust me, don't you?" "Pop, I am family." I looked at the paper, then at him. I saw the greed sweating off him. He did not want to pay my bills. He wanted to sell the Georgia land. He wanted to drain my accounts and leave me to rot in a state facility. I do not think so. "Gavin," I said, handing the paper back, "I can still write checks. I can still read a calendar. I am not invalid." Gavin's smile faltered. The mask slipped for a second, revealing the predator underneath. "Come on, Pop. Do not be stubborn," he said, his voice hardening. "You are confusing things lately," Maxine told me. "You forget where you put your keys. You forget names. You are slipping, Pop. It is only a matter of time before you make a big mistake and lose everything. I am trying to protect you. I am fine," I said firmly. "I do not need protection. I need an aspirin." Gavin stood up abruptly, the document crumpling in his hand. "Listen to me, you old fool," he hissed, dropping the pretense. "Accidents happen, Pop. Especially to old men who live alone in big houses with slippery stairs. You could fall. You could take the wrong pills. You could have a stroke, and nobody would find you for days." It was a threat, clear and naked. He was telling me that if I did not sign, I would have an accident. I looked him dead in the eye, channeling every ounce of authority I had wielded as a warehouse manager. "Get out of my house, Gavin." He laughed, a cold, dry sound. "You are making this hard on yourself, Pop. We are going to get that signature, one way or another. Maxine is losing patience, and so am I." He shoved the papers back into his briefcase and stormed out, slamming the front door so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. I sat there in the silence, my heart racing. I looked over at the window. The fern where I had poured the coffee was already drooping, its leaves turning a sickly yellow. They were not going to stop. They were going to escalate. I had survived the morning, but I knew that tonight the dinner would be deadly. I had to move fast, or I would not live to see the sunrise. Later that evening, the sound of a key turning in the lock startled me. I was sitting in the dark, nursing a glass of water and trying to figure out how to survive the night. The door opened and my daughter Candace walked in. She looked like a ghost wearing blue scrubs that were wrinkled and stained with coffee. Her eyes, usually so bright and full of life, were sunken and rimmed with dark purple circles. She looked 10 years older than her 32 years. "Hey, Daddy," she whispered, dropping her heavy bag on the floor. "I just got off a double shift. I needed to see you." I stood up, my heart aching at the sight of her. I wanted to run to her and tell her everything, to scream that her husband was a monster and her mother was his accomplice. But I knew I could not. If I told her now, she would think I was hallucinating. She would call Gavin, and he would have the perfect excuse to lock me away. So I swallowed the truth and hugged her instead. She felt thin in my arms, too. Thin. "You are working too hard, baby girl," I said softly. "You need to rest." "I cannot rest, Daddy." She pulled away, her face tight with anxiety. "That is actually why I am here. Gavin has this incredible investment opportunity. It is a commercial real estate deal downtown, a once-in-a-lifetime thing. But his liquidity is tied up in other projects right now. He needs $20,000 by Friday to secure the contract, or we lose everything." My blood ran cold. She was working herself into an early grave to fund his gambling debts, and she did not even know it. He was bleeding her dry, and now he had sent her here to bleed me. "Candace," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I do not have $20,000 lying around. You know I live on a pension." "Come on, Daddy," she pleaded, her voice rising in pitch. "I know you have savings. Mom said you have money put away for emergencies. This is an emergency. If Gavin closes this deal, we are set for life. He can finally pay off the house, and I can stop picking up extra shifts. Please, Daddy, do it for me." I looked into her desperate eyes and saw the brainwashing Gavin had done a number on her, convincing her that his failures were just temporary setbacks on the road to greatness. He was using her love as a weapon against me. "I cannot do it, Candace," I said firmly. "I will not give Gavin another dime." Her face crumbled, but then it hardened. The desperation turned into anger, flash freezing in her eyes. "You do not trust him," she accused, stepping back. "You never have. You just want to see him fail." "I want to see you safe," I countered. "He is using you, Candace. He is drowning in debt, and he is dragging you down with him. There is no investment deal. He is lying to you." That was the wrong thing to say. The air in the room shifted instantly, charged with a sudden volatility. Candace stiffened her spine, her hands balling into fists at her sides. "How dare you?" she hissed. Her voice was not loud, but it cut deeper than any shout. "You have no idea what you are talking about. Gavin is a visionary. He is trying to build a legacy for us, for your grandchildren. And you are too stubborn and small-minded to see it. It is not about vision, Candace. It is about arithmetic," I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. "You are working double shifts while he drives a BMW and plays golf. Does that look like a partnership to you? He needs that car for his image," she shouted, defending him with a blind loyalty that terrified me. "You just cannot stand that he does things differently than you. You worked in a dusty warehouse your whole life. You punched a clock. You kept your head down. You are jealous." "Daddy, jealous?" I asked, incredulous. "Yes, jealous." She spat the words out like venom. "You are jealous because he is a white man who dreams big, and you are just a bitter old black man who settled for mediocrity. You hate that he has ambition. You hate that he wants more than this small life you built, and you hate that I chose him over your approval." The words hit me like physical blows, calling me mediocre, calling me bitter, accusing me of racial resentment against the man who was plotting my murder. I had worked double shifts in the heat and the cold to put her through nursing school. I had saved every penny so she could have choices. And now she was standing in my living room parroting the poison Gavin had whispered in her ear. "I am not jealous, Candace," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I am terrified. He is not who you think he is. Open your eyes, baby girl. Look at the bank statements. Look at where the money really goes." "I have seen enough," she interrupted, grabbing her bag. "You are selfish. You are a selfish old man who would rather sit on his pile of pennies than help his own daughter succeed. I hope you enjoy your money, Daddy. I hope it keeps you warm because you are pushing us away." She turned on her heel and stormed out the door, slamming it behind her. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. I stood there alone in the dim light, feeling a profound isolation. I had lost her. Gavin had twisted her mind so thoroughly that she saw her savior as her enemy and her executioner as her hero. I sank onto the sofa, burying my face in my hands. I was completely alone. My wife wanted me dead. My son-in-law wanted my land. And my daughter thought I was a villain. The walls of the house I had built felt like they were closing in on me, but I could not give up. Not now. If I gave up, they would kill me. And then they would destroy Candace. Once I was gone, Gavin would drain the inheritance and leave her with nothing but debt and a broken heart. I had to protect the one thing they wanted most. The land. A sudden thought pierced through my despair. The deed. The original deed to the Georgia property, along with the updated survey maps and the timber valuation reports, I kept them in the small wall safe behind the painting in the study. Only Maxine and I knew the combination. I had not checked it in months, assuming it was secure. I stood up and moved quickly through the quiet house. The floorboards creaked under my boots, sounding like alarm bells in the night. I reached the study and closed the door softly. I took the painting of the old church down from the wall, revealing the steel face of the safe. My fingers trembled as I spun the dial. Right to 24, left to 10, right to 5. Click. I pulled the handle. The heavy metal door swung open. My stomach dropped. The safe was empty. The thick manila envelope that held the future of our family was gone. I felt around inside, hoping it had been pushed to the back, but my fingers met only cold steel. It was gone. The deed, the surveys, everything I needed to prove the value of the land, everything I needed to stop Gavin from selling it quickly. It was all gone. I stood there staring into the empty metal box, realizing the extent of my stupidity. I had underestimated Maxine. I thought she was just starting her plan, but she was already steps ahead of me. She must have taken them weeks ago, maybe months, giving them to Gavin so he could start lining up buyers. I closed the safe and hung the picture back up. My hands were steady now, steadied by a cold, hard realization. I walked back to the bedroom. Maxine was in the bed, sleeping soundly on her side, her breathing rhythmic and peaceful. She looked innocent in the moonlight, the woman I had loved for 40 years, but she was not sleeping next to her husband. She was sleeping next to her victim. She had stolen the deeds. She had poisoned my coffee. She had turned my daughter against me. And now she was lying there dreaming of the day I would stop breathing. I looked at her, and I felt the last ember of love for her die inside my chest. It turned into ash, cold and gray. She thought she had disarmed me. She thought she had taken my shield, but she did not know I had made digital copies of everything 5 years ago, encrypted and stored on a cloud server. She did not know existed, and she did not know that the power of attorney she wanted me to sign was useless without my consent, because the land was held in a way they did not understand. Yet I climbed into bed carefully, not wanting to wake the snake. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe. "You took the paper, Maxine," I thought to myself, "but you did not take the power. You made a mistake. You left me alive, and tomorrow I was going to make you regret that I slipped out of the house before the sun fully crested the horizon, leaving Maxine snoring softly in the bed we had shared for 40 years. My destination was not the police station, but a small 24-hour diner on the edge of town where the coffee was strong and the booths were high enough to hide secrets. I was meeting Kofi, my oldest friend and a retired detective who still had ears on the street and access to databases. He probably should not have. Kofi was already there nursing a black coffee, his face grim. He did not waste time with pleasantries or small talk concerning the weather. He slid a thick manila envelope across the formica table toward me. His eyes, usually warm with humor, were cold and hard like flint. "You are not going to like this, Jerome," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I dug deep, just like you asked. Your son-in-law. Gavin isn't just bad with money. He is drowning." I opened the envelope. The first thing I saw was a photograph of Gavin walking out of a notorious underground casino downtown, followed by a list of numbers that made my head spin. $2.4 million. I looked up at Kofi, waiting for him to tell me it was a mistake, a typo, anything other than the reality staring back at me. "He owes the wrong people," Jerome Kofi explained, leaning in close, "the kind of people who do not send debt collectors with clipboards. They send men with baseball bats and bone saws. He has been gambling on everything. Sports high-stakes poker real estate, speculation that never existed. He is leveraging debt to pay off interest on other debt. I looked at the documents again, Gavin. Wasn't investing my daughter's money. He was throwing it into a black hole. And now I understood the urgency. The arsenic, the pressure to sign the power of attorney, the desperation in his eyes when he asked for money. He was a dead man, walking, and my family land was his only way out. He has 2 weeks, Kofi said quietly. My sources say the Sharks gave him until the end of the month to come up with a lump sum, or they are going to make an example of him. That land of yours is his. Get out of jail free card. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest, replacing the fear. Gavin was willing to murder me to save his own skin. He was willing to sacrifice my daughter's future to cover his addiction. And Maxine? I asked the question, burning my throat. Is she in this? Kofi hesitated, tapping his finger on the table. I could not find a direct link to the gambling debts. But Jerome, I found something else, something strange about her finances. There are transfers, big ones, going to an account that has nothing to do with Gavin. But I cannot crack it yet. I need more time. I nodded, putting the papers back into the envelope, deeply thankful for a friend like Kofi. Watch your back, Jerome, he warned as I stood up. These people are cornered animals, and cornered animals bite. I drove home with the weight of the truth pressing down on me. Gavin owed $2.4 million. He wasn't just a failure. He was a ticking time bomb. And Maxine was hiding something else, something separate from Gavin's mess. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was quiet. Maxine's car was gone, likely to her weekly hair appointment, which gave me a narrow window of opportunity. I needed to find the missing deeds to the land, and I needed to find out what Kofi had missed. I entered the house, my senses on high alert. I went straight to the room. Maxine called her sewing room. It was her sanctuary, a place she rarely let me enter, claiming I would mess up her patterns. But today I did not care about patterns, I cared about survival. I started with the filing cabinet tucked in the corner. It was locked, but a logistics manager knows that most home locks are a joke. I used a thin screwdriver from my pocket and popped the mechanism in seconds. I rifled through the hanging folders, scanning for the deed to the Georgia land. It wasn't there, but as I reached the back of the drawer, my fingers brushed against a false bottom. It was a metal panel painted to match the drawer, but slightly loose. I pried it open. Inside there were no land deeds. Instead, there was a stack of bank statements bound with a rubber band and a small leather notebook. I opened the top statement. It was from a bank in Delaware, an account I had never seen. The name on the account was Maxine Blackwell. But the transaction history was what stopped my heart. Every month for the past 20 years, there was a transfer. $500, $1,000, sometimes $2,000. It added up to hundreds of thousands of dollars siphoned from our joint savings from my pension, from the money I thought we were putting away for our golden years. And next to each transfer was a note written in Maxine's neat cursive handwriting. For Marcus King, who was Marcus King. I searched my memory for the name, a cousin, a distant nephew, a charity, but nothing came up. The name was a ghost. I opened the leather notebook. It was full of dates and brief cryptic notes. Marcus needs braces, Marcus college fund, Marcus legal fees. My hands trembled. Maxine had a secret life, a secret financial drain that had been bleeding us dry for 2 decades. While I was working overtime, while I was driving a rusted truck to save money, she was sending a fortune to a man I did not know. Was he a lover, a blackmailer, another child she had kept hidden from me? The betrayal was so absolute, so complete that I felt dizzy. It wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about my entire life. It was all a lie. Every smile, every kiss, every moment of shared struggle had been underpinned by this massive deceit. I was so absorbed in the documents, so lost in the horror of the discovery that I did not hear the front door open. I did not hear the soft footsteps on the carpeted stairs. I only realized I was not alone when the floorboard behind me creaked. I spun around, clutching the notebook to my chest. Maxine stood in the doorway. She was not wearing her coat. She had come back early. Her eyes went from my face to the open filing cabinet and then to the notebook in my hand. She did not look surprised. She did not look guilty. She looked relieved. "You found it," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I was wondering when you would stop being so blind, Jerome. You always were good at counting boxes, but terrible at reading people." "Who is Marcus King?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Why have you been sending him our money? Maxine stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. She smoothed her skirt, her face settling into a mask of cold determination. It does not matter who he is. Jerome, she said, what matters is that you are snooping where you do not belong. You were supposed to be the good, quiet husband. You were supposed to trust me. I trusted you with my life, I shouted. I trusted you with everything, and you are poisoning me. You are stealing from me. Maxine laughed, a sound that chilled my blood. You never gave me what I needed, Jerome. You were always so small, so content with your little life. I needed more, and now I am going to take it. She reached into her purse, but she did not pull out a weapon. She pulled out her phone. What are you doing? I asked, wary of her calmness. I am doing what I have to do, she said, punching in 3 numbers, 911. Then she looked me dead in the eye and smiled, a smile that was pure evil. She hit the call button and brought the phone to her ear. Help me! She screamed suddenly, her voice transforming instantly into a shriek of terror. Please, send police. My husband is attacking me. He has a weapon. He is trying to kill me. I stood there frozen in shock. Maxine dropped the phone to the floor, leaving the line open. Then she grabbed the collar of her own silk blouse and ripped it open, buttons flying across the room. She scratched her own face, dragging her nails down her cheek until blood welled up. Maxine, stop! I yelled, taking a step forward. Stay back! She screamed at the top of her lungs, throwing herself against the filing cabinet, knocking a lamp to the floor with a loud crash. Get away from me, Jerome! She was framing me. She was staging a domestic assault right in front of my eyes and broadcasting it to the emergency operator. I realized with a jolt of horror that this was the end game. If the poison did not work, she would use the law. She would have me arrested, locked up, or put in a psych ward. Claiming I had snapped, I backed away. My hands raised, realizing I had walked straight into a trap. I looked at the woman tearing her own clothes, screaming for help, and I knew that the Jerome who lived in this house was dead. The sirens were already wailing in the distance, getting closer every second I had to run, but there was nowhere to go. The walls were closing in, and my wife was holding the key to my destruction. The red and blue lights flashed against the living room walls like a disco ball in a nightmare, blinding me as the front door burst open. Officers did not knock. They did not ask questions. They saw a woman with a torn blouse and a bleeding face screaming in terror, and they saw a black man standing over her. The math was simple in their eyes, and the solution was violence. I barely had time to raise my hands before I was tackled, the air leaving my lungs in a painful whoosh as my chest hit the hardwood floor. Knees pressed into my back, pinning me down, while Maxine sobbed theatrically in the corner, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He is having an episode," she wailed, her voice trembling with a perfect mix of fear and sorrow. "He has not been taking his medication, officers. He thinks everyone is stealing from him. He thinks I am trying to hurt him. Please do not hurt him. He does not know what he is doing." I tried to speak. I tried to tell them about the poison, about the hidden bank accounts, about Marcus King, but my face was pressed against the floorboards, and every time I opened my mouth, the pressure on my back increased. "Stop resisting," the officer shouted, twisting my arms behind me until my shoulders screamed in protest. The handcuffs clicked shut, cold and tight, biting into my wrists. They dragged me up, not like a man, but like a sack of feed. Maxine stood there, clutching her chest, tears streaming down her face, masking the triumph in her eyes. "Is he going to jail?" she asked the sergeant, her voice small and fragile. "If he is off his meds and violent, ma'am, we can take him in for a psychiatric evaluation," the sergeant replied, looking at me with disgust. "We can put him on a 5150 hold. That gives the doctors 72 hours to assess him. If he is a danger to himself or others, they will keep him." "Please do that," Maxine begged. "He needs help. He is losing his mind." I looked at her one last time as they shoved me toward the door. "You are the one who needs help, Maxine," I said, my voice low and steady. "You are going to rot for this." She just buried her face in her hands, sobbing louder to drown out my truth. The neighbors were out on their lawns watching the spectacle as Jerome Blackwell, the quiet man who kept his lawn perfect, was dragged away in the back of a police cruiser. I did not struggle anymore. I saved my energy. I knew that fighting the police would only give them a reason to silence me permanently. I sat in the hard plastic seat watching my house disappear, and realized that the cage Maxine had built for me was not a prison cell. It was a padded room. The hospital smelled of bleach and hopelessness. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a sound that drilled into my skull, increasing the headache that the arsenic had started. I was stripped of my clothes, my belt, and my dignity, dressed in a thin paper gown and placed in a room with no handle on the inside of the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, shivering, not from cold, but from the realization of how deep this conspiracy went. The door opened and a man walked in holding a clipboard. He was tall, with silver hair and a tan that spoke of long afternoons on the golf course. He wore a white coat that was too clean and a smile that did not reach his eyes. I recognized him immediately. It was Dr. Albright, the man Gavin played golf with every Sunday, the man Maxine had mentioned in the garden. "Hello, Jerome," Dr. Albright said, his voice smooth and condescending. "I hear we are having a rough day. I am not crazy." "Doctor," I said, standing up to meet his gaze. "My wife is poisoning me with arsenic. My son-in-law is in debt to the mob. They are trying to steal my land. I need a blood test immediately." Dr. Albright did not write anything down. He just tapped his pen against the clipboard and shook his head sadly. "Paranoid delusions, aggression, conspiracy theories. It is exactly as your wife described. The dementia is progressing faster than we thought." "I am not delusional." I stepped forward, my fists clenched. "Check my blood. You will find the arsenic." "You are agitated, Jerome," Dr. Albright said, taking a step back. He snapped his fingers and 2 large orderlies appeared in the doorway. "Listen to me. I am a wealthy man. I can pay for a test," I shouted, desperate now, realizing the walls were closing in. "We are going to give you something to help you relax, Jerome," the doctor said, ignoring my plea entirely. "You need to sleep. The brain needs rest to heal." The orderlies grabbed me, holding my arms like vices. I struggled, but I was an old man, weakened by poison, fighting 2 giants. Dr. Albright approached with a syringe, the liquid inside clear and terrifying. "This is for your own good," he said. I felt the prick of the needle in my shoulder, and then the cold fire of the sedative spreading through my veins. My legs turned to rubber. The room began to spin, tilting on its axis. I saw Dr. Albright smiling that shark smile as the darkness rose up to swallow me. "Make sure he stays under for at least 12 hours, he told the orderlies. "Tell his family he is resting comfortably." The last thing I thought before the blackness took me was that I had failed. I was going to die in this room, and they were going to get away with it. I woke up drowning in a thick gray fog. My mouth tasted like cotton and copper. My limbs felt heavy, as if they were made of lead and not flesh. I blinked, trying to clear the blur from my vision. The room was dim, the only light coming from the hallway through the small observation window in the door. I was still alive, but I was weak. I tried to sit up, and the world tilted dangerously. I forced myself to breathe slow and deep, fighting the nausea. The clock on the wall said it was 3 a.m, the graveyard shift, the time when the hospital was quietest, the time when things could happen unseen. I needed to move fast before Albright came back with another dose. I needed an ally. The door creaked open softly. A nurse slipped in, carrying a tray with a small paper cup and a pitcher of water. She was young, African-American with tired eyes and braids pulled back into a tight bun. She looked at me and I saw a flicker of surprise that I was awake. "Mr. Blackwell," she whispered, checking her watch. "You should be out cold with the dose they gave you." "I have a high tolerance." I rasped, my voice sounding like gravel scraping together. "I need you to listen to me." She hesitated, her hand hovering over the tray. "You need to take your water and go back to sleep." The doctor left strict orders. "The doctor is trying to kill me," I said, forcing the words out through my dry throat. "He is a friend of the man who is stealing my life." The nurse took a step back, her face closing off. "Look, Mr. Blackwell, I read your chart. Paranoia is a symptom of your condition. I am not paranoid. I am poisoned," I said, leaning forward, gripping the bed rail. "Look at my eyes. Look at the lines on my fingernails. Those are Mies lines, a sign of heavy metal poisoning, arsenic." She paused, looking at my hands involuntarily. I saw the curiosity war with her training. "I do not have time to convince you with words," I said. I reached down to my ankle. It was a struggle, my body protesting every movement, but I managed to pull off the thick wool sock I had been wearing when the police took me. They had taken my shoes and my belt, but they had left my socks. Inside the toe of the sock, rolled tight and wrapped in a rubber band, was a small bundle. I pulled it out and held it up. It was a roll of $100 bills, $5,000 that I always kept on me for emergencies, a habit from the old days when cash was the only thing you could trust. I unwrapped the roll. The sight of the money made her eyes widen. "I am not crazy," I said, holding the cash out to her. "This is $5,000. It is yours, all of it. If you do two things for me." She looked at the door, then back at the money. "What things?" she whispered. "Draw a vial of my blood. Right now, before the arsenic leaves my system, send it to an independent lab, not the hospital lab. And make one phone call." "Who do you want me to call?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Angela Rossi," I said. "The name of the toughest civil rights attorney in the state, a woman who ate corrupt doctors for breakfast. Tell her Jerome Blackwell has the money and he has the proof. Tell her to get me out of here." The nurse looked at me, searching my face for signs of madness. She looked at the money, which was more than she made in 2 months. Then she looked at the door where the orderlies patrolled. "If I get caught, I lose my license," she said. "If you do not help me, I lose my life," I countered. "Please, you are the only person in this world who can save me." She stood there for a long heartbeat, the silence stretching tight as a wire. Then she stepped forward and took the money, shoving it deep into her scrub pocket. "Give me your arm," she whispered, pulling a tourniquet and a needle from her pocket. "I will do it, but you better be right, old man." I extended my arm, watching the dark blood flow into the vial. It looked black in the dim light. It was the evidence that would hang them all. "Make the call," I said as she capped the vial. "Make the call and tell her to bring a judge." She nodded, slipping the vial into her pocket alongside the cash. "I will make the call," she promised. She slipped out of the room, leaving me alone in the dark again. But this time, I wasn't helpless. The fog was lifting. I lay back on the pillow and closed my eyes, waiting for the cavalry to arrive. My family thought they had buried me, but they forgot that seeds grow in the dark. The fluorescent hum of the hospital room was the soundtrack to my execution. Dr. Albright stood by the bed, holding the clipboard that would sign away my freedom. Gavin was there too, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, looking at me with eyes devoid of mercy. He tapped the pen against the paper, a rhythmic clicking that sounded like a countdown sign here. Albright said, pointing to the line on the commitment papers, "This grants permanent medical and financial guardianship to your son-in-law. It is for the best. Jerome, you are not capable of making decisions anymore." I sat on the edge of the bed, my head lolling to the side, feigning the stupor of the sedatives inside my mind was sharp, a razor blade waiting to cut, but my body was heavy. I could not fight them physically. Gavin leaned in, his breath smelling of mints and rot. "Do not worry, Pop," he whispered. "I will take good care of everything, especially the land." He put the pen to the paper, ready to sign on my behalf, ready to seal my fate. Suddenly, the double doors of the ward swung open with a crash that made Albright jump. A woman strode in, heels clicking on the linoleum like gunfire. She was small, fiercely Italian, and dressed in a power suit that screamed authority. "Angela Rossi, step away from my client," she barked, her voice echoing off the sterile walls. Albright puffed up his chest indignantly. "Who do you think you are?" "This is a restricted area. I am the person who is going to strip the license from your wall if you do not drop that pen right now," Rossi said, slamming a folded document onto the tray table. "This is a court order signed by Judge Holloway 10 minutes ago granting me immediate temporary custody of Mr. Jerome Blackwell, pending a toxicology investigation." Gavin turned pale, the pen slipping from his fingers. "What is this?" "You cannot do this. He is sick. He needs help. He needs protection from you," Rossi countered, stepping between Gavin and me. "I have an independent blood panel here, showing lethal levels of arsenic. The police are on their way to seize his medical records. If you sign that paper, Mr. Gavin, I will add fraud and kidnapping to the list of charges you are already facing." Gavin backed away, his hands raised in surrender, panic flaring in his eyes. "We were just following Dr. Orders," he stammered, looking at Albright. I kept my head down, hiding the triumph in my eyes. Rossi had come just in time. She signaled to the orderlies behind her. "Get Mr. Blackwell a wheelchair, we are leaving." As they wheeled me out, I let a line of drool escape my lips, playing the part of the broken man perfectly. Gavin watched me go, his fists clenched, his plan crumbling. but he did not know the half of it. He thought he had lost a prisoner. He did not realize he had just released a hunter. The ride home was silent. Rossi drove her luxury sedan with the precision of a tank commander. She had wanted to take me to a safe house, but I insisted on going back. I told her I needed to be in the belly of the beast to finish them. She agreed reluctantly on the condition that she would have a team monitoring the house from a van down the street. When they wheeled me into my own living room, Maxine was waiting. She played the role of the relieved wife, crying crocodile tears, thanking Rossi for bringing me home. But when Rossi left with a stern warning that she would be watching, Maxine's demeanor changed instantly. The moment the door clicked shut, she wiped her eyes and looked at me with disgust. "Put him in the corner," she told Gavin, who had followed us home in his own car. "He stinks of the hospital." They parked my wheelchair facing the window away from the center of the room, treating me like a piece of furniture that had outlived its usefulness. I slumped in the chair, my chin on my chest, staring blankly at the floor pattern, but my ears were wide open. Maxine and Gavin sat at the dining table, opening a bottle of wine to celebrate their narrow escape. They thought I was vegetable sedated into oblivion by the drugs Albright had pumped into me before I left. "That was too close," Gavin said, his voice shaking slightly. "Rossi is a shark, if she digs too deep into the toxicology." "Relax," Maxine interrupted, pouring wine. "The arsenic levels were low enough to be environmental. We can blame it on the old pipes or the fertilizer he uses in the garden. The important thing is he is here. He is helpless, and we still have the papers?" Gavin took a long drink. "We need to move fast. The investors are giving me until Friday. If I do not have the deed transfer initiated, they are going to break my legs." "Do it now," Maxine said, looking at my back with cold indifference. "He is out of it. Put the pen in his hand. Guide it if you have to. Once we have the signature on the deed transfer and the power of attorney, we can sell the land by tomorrow afternoon." They discussed the numbers openly in front of me, splitting the profits of my life's work. Maxine talked about sending a large sum to Marcus King, finally revealing that he was in trouble with the law and needed bail money. Gavin talked about paying off the mob and buying a new boat. I listened to every word, cataloging their greed, fueling my rage. They were dissecting my life, dividing the spoils while the body was still warm. They did not see a father or a husband. They saw a signature. They saw a check. I focused on my breathing, slow and shallow, waiting for the moment. They were so confident, so arrogant. They thought the drugs had wiped my mind. They did not know that the only thing keeping me in that chair was the promise of their total destruction. "All right, Pop. Time to do your civic duty," Gavin said, walking over to me. He smelled of wine and desperation. He spun my wheelchair around so I faced the table. On the surface, spread out like a feast, were the documents. The deed to the Georgia land, the irrevocable transfer of assets, the power of attorney. Maxine stood behind me, her hands on my shoulders, squeezing hard enough to bruise. "Wake up, old man," she hissed in my ear. "Just one little scribble and you can go back to sleep forever." Gavin clicked a gold pen and jammed it into my trembling hand. "Sign. Right here." Pop, lightly tapping the signature line. "Just your name. Jerome Blackwell. That is all we need." My hand shook violently, not because I was weak, but because I was fighting the urge to stab the pen into his eye. I let the tip of the pen hover over the paper, making ink blots. "Help him," Maxine ordered. "Guide his hand." Gavin grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin, forcing the pen down. "Just sign it, you old mule," he muttered. I let my hand go limp, forcing him to do the work. But then at the last second, as the pen touched the paper, I seized control. I channeled all my anger, all my betrayal into my fingers. I did not sign Jerome Blackwell. With a jerky, spastic motion, I scrawled 3 words across the signature line in big, jagged letters. "I know everything." The letters were messy looking, like the scratchings of a madman, but they were legible. Gavin did not even look. He was so eager, so blinded by the need to get it done, that he snatched the paper away the moment the ink stopped flowing. "Done!" he shouted triumphantly, waving the document in the air. "We got it. Maxine, we are rich." He shoved the paper into his briefcase without a second glance, snapping the lock shut as if he were trapping a demon inside. He did not see the message. He did not see his death warrant. He only saw the dollar signs. Maxine patted my head like I was a dog. "Good boy, Jerome," she said. "Now you can rot in peace." I slumped back in the chair, letting my mouth hang open, letting a line of drool drip onto my shirt. Inside, I was smiling a wolfish grin. They had their paper, but they had signed a contract with the devil, and collection day was coming sooner than they thought. I watched Gavin strut out of the house, briefcase in hand, heading to his victory dinner. He thought he had won, he thought it was over, but the dinner was just the beginning. Tonight, I would rise from this wheelchair, and I would turn their celebration into a wake. The restaurant was called the Obsidian Room, and it was the kind of place where a bottle of water cost more than my hourly wage back at the warehouse. The walls were lined with black velvet, and the chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen tears. Gavin had rented the entire private banquet hall for his victory lap. He pushed my wheelchair over the plush carpet, parading me past the round tables like a prize bull at a county fair. Only I was the bull he intended to slaughter. I slumped in the chair, my head lolling to the right, keeping my mouth slightly open to maintain the illusion of a medicated invalid. My eyes were half closed, but I saw everything. The room was filled with men in sharp Italian suits and women dripping in diamonds. Gavin had told Candace these were angel investors, venture capitalists from the city who were going to turn the Georgia land into a luxury resort. But I knew better. I recognized the look in their eyes. It was the same look the stray dogs had back in the neighborhood before they bit you, hungry, cold, and dangerous. These were not investors. They were loan sharks, bookies, and the kind of men who broke fingers for a living. Gavin owed them millions, and I was his down payment. Candace walked beside me, looking beautiful in a silver dress, but her eyes were dead. She looked exhausted, thin, and haunted. She reached down and wiped my chin with a napkin, her touch gentle but filled with a pity that burned my skin. "Oh, Daddy," she whispered. "I am so sorry you have to be like this. But Gavin says this is for the best. We are securing the future." I wanted to grab her hand and tell her that her husband was serving us up to wolves. But I had to wait. The trap was set, but the door had not slammed shut yet. Gavin parked me at the head table facing the room. He wanted me to see his triumph. He wanted me to witness the moment he became the king of my castle. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gavin boomed, his voice projecting with the confidence of a man who thinks he has gotten away with murder. "Thank you for coming tonight. Tonight we celebrate not just a deal, but a legacy." The sharks at the tables clapped politely, their eyes not on Gavin, but on the expensive stakes being placed in front of them. They did not care about legacies. They cared about the $2.4 million Gavin had promised to pay them by Monday. I sat there staring at the white tablecloth, gripping the armrests of the wheelchair so hard my knuckles ached. The anger inside me was a physical thing, a hot coal in my chest burning through the sedative fog I had pretended to be in. I watched Gavin work the room, shaking hands, laughing too loud, pouring expensive champagne. He was high on adrenaline, high on the belief that he had outsmarted the old black man. He leaned down to me, whispering in my ear so no one else could hear. "Enjoy the view. Pop, this is what success looks like. Try not to drool on the tablecloth. It is Egyptian cotton." He patted my shoulder condescendingly and walked back to the microphone, tapping it to get everyone's attention. The room went quiet. The sharks stopped eating. The air grew heavy with expectation. "I would like to propose a toast," Gavin said, raising his glass of champagne. The light caught the gold of his watch, a watch he had probably bought with the money Maxine had stolen from me. "To vision," he declared, "to the future and to the difficult decisions we have to make to get there." He turned and pointed his glass directly at me. "Most of all, I want to thank my father-in-law, Jerome." Gavin said, his smile widening, showing all his teeth. "He is a man of the past, a man who worked hard with his hands but did not have the head for the big picture." A few people chuckled. Candace looked down at her plate, embarrassed. For years, that prime timberland in Georgia sat rotting just like Jerome here. Gavin continued, cruel and sharp. He held on to it out of stubbornness, out of some misguided sense of tradition. He was a mule pulling a plow in the age of tractors. The laughter grew louder this time. It was mocking, derisive. The sharks were enjoying the show, but nature has a way of correcting mistakes, Gavin said, walking over to stand right next to my wheelchair. He placed a hand on my head, patting me like a dog. "Nature clears out the dead wood to make room for new growth, and Jerome here, well, he expired right on time." He leaned in close to my face, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Thanks for getting out of the way, Pop," he said loud enough for the front tables to hear. Thanks for losing your mind so I could use mine. You served your purpose. Now you can just fade away. He raised his glass higher. To the new ownership, to the Blackwell estate which is about to become the Gavin Miller empire. Cheers! Cheers! The room responded, a chorus of greed. Gavin threw his head back and drank the champagne, the liquid bubbling down his throat. I watched his throat move. I watched the arrogance radiate off him like heat, and I decided that I had heard enough. I stopped the shallow breathing. I stopped the slumping. I engaged the muscles in my core muscles built from 40 years of lifting crates and moving steel. I reached up and grabbed Gavin's wrist, the one holding the empty glass. His eyes snapped open, looking down at me in shock. I did not let go. I squeezed. My grip was iron. The glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound was like a gunshot silencing the room. Gavin tried to pull away, but I held him fast. Pop, he stammered, confusion clouding his face. Let go. You are hurting me. I slowly lifted my head. The vacant look was gone from my eyes, replaced by a fire that made him flinch. I used his arm as leverage and pulled myself up. The wheelchair rolled backward, hitting the wall with a dull thud. I stood up straight, unfolding to my full height of 6 feet 2 inches. I smoothed the front of my suit jacket, which Maxine had put on me earlier, like she was dressing a corpse. The room was deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear Gavin breathing, hitching in his throat. Jerome. Dr. Albright stood up from a nearby table, his face pale. Sit down. You are having an episode. I ignored him. I did not look at Albright. I did not look at the sharks. I looked only at Gavin. I reached out with my other hand and plucked the microphone from his trembling fingers. The feedback squealed, a high-pitched shriek that made everyone wince. I brought the microphone to my lips. My voice did not shake. It was deep, resonant, and steady. The voice of a man who commanded respect. You made a mistake, Gavin, I said, my voice booming through the speakers. You thought I was dead. Wood. You thought I was a mule. I took a step toward him, forcing him to step back. But you forgot one thing, I continued. You forgot that mule's kick. I turned to the room, looking at the faces of the men who held Gavin debt. You came here for a celebration, I said, my eyes locking with the biggest shark in the room, a man with a scar running down his cheek. You came here because this boy promised you land. He promised you millions. He promised you a payday. I reached into my inside pocket. Gavin flinched, thinking I had a gun. But I pulled out a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it slowly, deliberately. This is a copy of the deed transfer. Gavin signed yesterday, I said, holding it up. Gavin lunged for it. Give me that. I backhanded him. It was a short, sharp blow that sent him stumbling back, into the table, knocking over glasses and silverware. Sit down, boy, I roared. Gavin fell into a chair, clutching his cheek, terrified. I turned back to the crowd. He signed this, thinking he was taking control, I said. But he did not read the signature line. I tossed the paper onto the table in front of the scarred man. Read it. The man picked it up. He looked at the signature line where I had scrawled, I know everything. He looked up at me and then at Gavin. A cruel smile played on his lips. This paper is worthless, I announced. The land in Georgia was placed into an irrevocable trust 3 days ago. It cannot be sold, it cannot be transferred, and it certainly cannot be used to pay off gambling debts. The room erupted in murmurs. The sharks stood up. Gavin, I said, stepping closer until I was looming over him. I am awake, and I am here to tell you that this is not a celebration. I leaned down the microphone, amplifying my whisper into a roar. I am not dead, son, and this party, this is your funeral. The silence in the banquet hall was heavy and suffocating, like a wool blanket soaked in water. Gavin sat slumped in his chair, his face the color of ash, his arrogance stripped away, leaving only a terrified boy in a man's suit. The sharks at the tables were murmuring, their eyes darting between the worthless deed on the table and the man who owed them millions. But I was not finished with Gavin yet, not by a long shot. I had destroyed his financial future, but now I had to destroy the hold he had on my daughter. I turned my back on him slowly, deliberately, showing him he was no longer a threat to me. I looked at Candace. She was standing near the head table, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. She looked at me, and then at her husband, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of her reality. Daddy, she whispered, her voice trembling. What is going on? What do you mean you know everything? I walked toward her, my steps heavy on the plush carpet. I stopped, just a few feet away, close enough to see the tears welling in her eyes, close enough to see the exhaustion etched into her beautiful face. I am doing this for you. Baby girl, I said, my voice softening just a fraction. I am doing this to show you who he really is. Candace shook her head, denial already rising in her throat. No. Daddy, stop it. You are ruining everything. He ruined it, Candace, I said, pointing a finger at Gavin without looking at him. He ruined it the day he decided you were nothing more than a paycheck. He ruined it the day he decided to betray you in the worst way possible. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black remote control Kofi. My friend and former detective had been busy. While I was playing the invalid in the wheelchair, Kofi had hacked into the venue audio-visual system. He was sitting in a van outside right now waiting for my signal. Look. The screen, Candace, I commanded, pointing to the massive projection screen behind the stage that was currently displaying a loop of Gavin and Candace wedding photos. She hesitated, but her eyes drifted upward. I pressed the button. The wedding photos vanished. The screen flickered and then a new image appeared. It was high resolution, grainy but unmistakable. It showed Gavin sitting at an outdoor cafe holding hands with a woman. She was laughing, throwing her head back, and Gavin was looking at her with a look of pure lust. The woman was not a stranger. It was not some random girl from a bar. It was Sheila Maxine, best friend. The woman who had sat in the front row at Candace's wedding. The woman who came to our house for Thanksgiving. A gasp went through the room. I heard chairs scraping as people leaned forward to get a better look. Candace froze. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. I pressed the button again. A new photo appeared. This one was more intimate, Gavin and Sheila walking into a hotel room, his hand resting possessively on her lower back, and another Gavin kissing Sheila in his car, the BMW that my daughter was working double shifts to pay for. Candace made a sound, a low, wounded noise like an animal in a trap. She looked at Gavin, her eyes burning. Is that true? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Is that? Sheila. Gavin scrambled up from his chair, his hands waving frantically. Candace, baby, wait, it is not what it looks like. He doctored those photos. The old man is crazy. He is trying to frame me. I did not say a word. I just pressed the button one more time. A video started playing. It was footage from a security camera clearly taken from inside a hotel hallway. It showed Gavin and Sheila leaving a room together, disheveled and smiling. Gavin slapped her on the rear playfully, and Sheila giggled, leaning in to whisper something in his ear. The date stamp on the video was from 3 days ago. 3 days ago when Candace was working an overnight shift at the hospital to pay for this party. Candace turned to Gavin, her face a mask of absolute betrayal. You slept with her, she screamed. You slept with my mother's best friend. Gavin stammered, sweat pouring down his face. Candace, please listen. I stepped between them, blocking his path to her. You think that is the worst of it? I asked Candace, my voice grim. You think his infidelity is the only secret? Candace looked at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. What else, Daddy? What else could there possibly be? I looked at her with infinite sadness. This next part was going to hurt her more than the cheating. It was going to break her heart, but it was the only way to save her life. Your mother knows, I said. Candace shook her head. No, Mommy would never. She loves me. She would never let him do this. I raised the remote again. Listen. I pressed the play button for the audio file Kofi had extracted from the bugs we planted in the house. The sound of my wife Maxine's voice filled the banquet hall, amplified by the expensive speakers. It was crystal clear, terrifyingly casual. The recording began mid-conversation. Gavin's voice came first, whining and petulant. But Sheila is getting demanding. Maxine, she wants me to take her to Cabo. I cannot afford Cabo and pay the interest on the loans. Then, Maxine's voice, smooth and cold. Listen, Gavin, I do not care who you screw. You can sleep with the whole church choir for all I care. Just make sure Candace does not find out. We need her to keep picking up those shifts. If she leaves you, or if she stops working, we lose our cash flow. Let him have his fun. Sheila is good at keeping secrets. Just keep Candace happy enough to keep signing the checks. As long as that girl is working, she is paying for our future." The recording ended, leaving a silence so profound it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Candace stood there looking as if she had been struck by lightning. Her knees buckled and she sank to the floor, her silver dress pooling around her. She covered her ears, shaking her head violently back and forth as if trying to unhear the words. "Mommy," she wailed, a sound of pure agony. She knew. She called me a cash flow. The guests were no longer whispering. They were staring in horror, witnessing the total destruction of a family. The sharks looked at Gavin with disgust. Even criminals have codes, and selling out your own wife with her mother permission crossed a line. Gavin stood there exposed and naked in his treachery. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at his weeping wife. His face twisted, transforming from fear to a blind animalistic rage. He had lost the land. He had lost the money. He had lost his reputation, and now he was losing his control over Candace. I walked over to Candace and knelt down, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Baby girl," I said softly, "I am so sorry." She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "You were right," she whispered. "You were right about everything." She stood up slowly, using my arm for support. She wiped her face, with the back of her hand smearing mascara across her cheek. She took a deep breath and turned to face Gavin. The sadness in her eyes was gone, replaced by a fury that matched my own. "You monster," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You used me. You and my mother used me." Gavin sneered, stepping toward her. "You are nothing without me, Candace. You are just a nurse. I made you someone." Candace screamed a primal sound of rage and lunged at him. She did not slap him. She attacked him, clawing at his face, pounding her fists against his chest, pouring years of manipulation and betrayal into every blow. "You bastard!" she shrieked, tearing at his expensive suit jacket. "I worked for you. I bled for you." Gavin stumbled back, surprised by her ferocity, but then his instinct took over, the instinct of a bully losing control. He grabbed her wrists, stopping her assault. Then with a snarl, he backhanded her across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the room. Candace fell back, hitting the floor, hard blood welling on her lip. "You stupid bitch!" Gavin shouted, raising his hand again. "I made you." That was his last mistake. The moment his hand struck my daughter, something inside me snapped. It was the same cold clarity I had felt when I poured the poisoned coffee into the plant, but amplified 1,000 times. I did not think. I did not hesitate. I reached into the waistband of my trousers beneath the suit jacket and drew the Smith & Wesson revolver I had carried legally for 20 years. I stepped over Candace, placing myself between her and the man who had just hit her. I leveled the gun at Gavin's center, mass holding it steady with both hands. The room gasped. Some of the sharks reached for their own weapons but stopped when they saw the look in my eyes. They knew a man protecting his child was dangerous. They decided to let this play out. Gavin froze his hand, still raised in the air. He looked down the barrel of the gun, his eyes going wide with terror. "Pop, what are you doing?" he stammered, backing away, his hands coming up in surrender. "Put it away. You are crazy." I cocked the hammer. The click was loud and final. "Get your hands off my daughter!" I growled, my voice a low rumble like thunder. Gavin stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet and falling onto his backside. He scrambled away, crab walking across the carpet, trying to put distance between himself and the bullet. I stepped forward, keeping the gun trained on his chest. "You touch her again," I said, my voice devoid of mercy. "You look at her again, and I will put you in the ground right here." Candace sat up behind me, holding her cheek, looking at me with awe and terror. "Daddy, don't." I did not look away from Gavin. "Stay down, Candace," I said calmly. "This man is done." Gavin was crying now, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat. "Please, Jerome, please do not shoot me. I am sorry." "You are not sorry," I said. "You are just caught." I stood over him, the gun steady, the rage burning cold and clean. "But I am not going to kill you, Gavin," I said, lowering the gun slightly but keeping it ready. "Death is too easy for you. You owe money to dangerous men. You are going to jail for attempted murder, and your wife just saw you for the coward you are." I looked around the room at the men watching us. "Gentlemen," I announced, my voice ringing out, "he is all yours." I holstered the gun and turned to help my daughter up. Gavin lay on the floor, sobbing, surrounded by the sharks who were now standing up, buttoning their jackets and moving toward him with dark intentions. The party was over, but the reckoning had just begun. The room did not explode into chaos immediately. Instead, it settled into a terrifying stillness that was far worse than the screaming had been. I holstered my revolver, a signal that I was done with the domestic discipline. But the men in the room were just getting started. The scarred man at the head table stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket with a deliberate calmness that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. He did not look at the crying woman on the floor or the adulterer cowering on the carpet. He looked at me, calculating whether I was a threat or an opportunity. I saw the movement out of the corner of my eye. 2 men by the door reached inside their coats, the metallic glint of firearms flashing briefly under the crystal chandeliers. Candace saw it too, and she let out a strangled gasp, clutching my leg for protection. I placed a hand on her head, keeping her low, shielding her with my body. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and loud enough to carry to the back of the room, "you are not here for a shootout. You are here for your money." The scarred man raised a hand and his bodyguards froze. He walked around the table, his eyes fixed on Gavin like a butcher eyeing a pig. "We were promised collateral," the man said, his voice like gravel grinding together. "This boy said he had the deed to 300 acres of prime Georgia timberland. He said the transfer was signed tonight." Gavin scrambled to his knees, wiping snot from his face, desperately trying to pivot back to the con. Yes, I have it." He pointed to the briefcase I had knocked over earlier. "The papers are right there." He signed them. "It is all yours. Just get him out of here, please." The scarred man looked at the briefcase, then at me. "Is that true, old man? Did you sign?" I looked at Gavin, watching the hope flare in his eyes, a pathetic flickering flame that I was about to extinguish forever. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket, again slowly, so no one would shoot me. I pulled out a thick document bound in blue legal covers. "He has a piece of paper," I said, holding up the document. "But I have the truth." I tossed the blue folder onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding across the tablecloth until it stopped right in front of the scarred man. "Open it," I commanded. The man picked it up, flipping past the cover page. He read the first paragraph and his eyebrows shot up. "What is this?" he asked, looking at Gavin with lethal intent. "Tell him, Gavin," I said. My voice cold. "Tell him what you forgot to check before you popped the champagne." Gavin was shaking his head, confusion warring with terror. "I do not know what that is." "I have the deed. It is signed." "That deed is a piece of trash." I roared, my voice filling the hall. I turned back to the investors who were now realizing they had been played 3 days ago while this idiot was busy poisoning my coffee and sleeping with my wife's best friend. I met with my attorney, Angela Rossi. We established the Blackwell Heritage Preservation Trust. It is an irrevocable trust dedicated to the preservation of black land ownership in the South. I took a step closer to the table, pointing at the document. At 9 a.m. this morning, that trust was recorded with the county clerk. The land does not belong to me anymore. It belongs to history, it belongs to the community, and it is locked up tighter than a drum. Gavin looked like he was having a stroke. "No, that is impossible. You were sick, you were confused. I was never confused, son," I said, leaning down until we were face to face. I was waiting. I looked at the scarred man. The document Gavin has is void. The signature is a joke, and even if it were real, he cannot sell what I do not own. That land will never be a resort. It will never be a casino, and it will never ever be used to pay off a gambling debt. The realization hit the room like a physical wave. The money was gone. The collateral was a ghost, and Gavin Miller was the man who had wasted their time. The scarred man closed the blue folder gently. Then he looked at Gavin. The look was devoid of anger. It was just business. And that was much, much scarier. "You owe us $2.4 million, the man said softly. Gavin scrambled backward, crab-walking until his back hit the stage. "Please listen. He tricked me. He set me up. I can get the money. I just need time." "You had time," the man said. He snapped his fingers and the 2 men by the door started moving forward, their hands reaching under their coats again. Gavin looked around the room, searching for an exit, searching for a friend, searching for anyone who would save him. He looked at Candace, but she was staring at the floor, unable to even look at him. He looked at me, his eyes wide and wet with tears. "Pop, please," he begged, clutching at my pant leg. "You cannot let them take me. They will kill me. Pop. I am family." I looked down at the man who had called me a mule, who had tried to erase my mind, who had laughed while he planned my death. I kicked his hand away, breaking his grip. "I am not your father," I said, my voice ice cold. "And you lost the right to be family when you put arsenic in my cup." Gavin began to scream a high-pitched sound of pure terror as the men closed in. But I was not going to let them kill him. Death was too easy. Death was an escape. I had a different punishment in mind, one that would last a lot longer than a bullet. I raised my hand, snapping my fingers loudly. "Now!" I shouted. The kitchen doors behind the stage burst open, but it was not. Waiters who came out. It was a SWAT team. Heavily armed officers in tactical gear poured into the room, shouting orders. "Police, drop your weapons. Get on the ground." The sharks froze. The scarred man cursed under his breath, raising his hands slowly. He knew the game. He knew when he was beat. The bodyguards dropped their guns, kicking them away. Gavin looked at the police, and for a second he looked relieved. He thought he was being saved. He thought he was going into protective custody. He was wrong. Two detectives in suits walked in behind the SWAT team, pushing through the confused crowd. One of them was my friend Kofi. The other was a man I did not know, holding a pair of handcuffs. They walked straight to Gavin, pulling him up from the floor by his expensive lapels. "Gavin Miller, you are under arrest," the detective said. Gavin laughed hysterically, sounds bubbling out of his throat. "Arrested for what? For fraud, for gambling. I will take it. Take me away." The detective slammed him against the wall, pinning him there. "Not for fraud, son," the detective said. "For the attempted murder of Jerome Blackwell." Gavin stopped laughing. "What, we have the toxicology report from your father-in-law blood. It shows lethal levels of arsenic. We have the audio recordings of you and your mother-in-law planning the dosage, and we have the receipt for the poison found in your car." Gavin went limp, his legs giving out. The officers had to hold him up to cuff him. "Attempted murder carries 20 years, Gavin," I said, walking up to him one last time. "And do you know what the best part is?" He looked at me, his eyes dead. "The men you owe money to, they have friends in prison, lots of friends. You are not going to be safe inside, and you are not going to be safe outside. You are going to spend every day of the next 20 years looking over your shoulder, wondering when the bill comes due." Gavin began to sob, broken guttural sounds of a man who has lost everything. "Get him out of my sight," I said, turning my back on him. They dragged him away, his expensive shoes dragging on the carpet, leaving streaks of tears and snot on the floor of his victory party. I looked at Candace. She was standing up now, watching her husband being hauled away like garbage. She did not cry, she did not scream, she just looked tired. "Come on, baby girl," I said, offering her my arm. "Let us go home." She took my arm, leaning her head on my shoulder. We walked out of the obsidian room, leaving the sharks to explain their weapons to the police, leaving the shattered glass and the ruined dreams behind us. I had won the battle. The land was safe. The monster was in chains. But the war was not over yet. There was still one person left to reckon with. One person waiting at home thinking she had gotten away with it. Maxine. The drive back to the house was the longest journey of my life. Candace sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing streetlights, her silence heavier than any scream could have been. We pulled into the driveway, and the house looked exactly as I had left it, warm and inviting with the porch light glowing soft yellow. It was a lie, just like the woman waiting inside. I turned off the engine and saw a second car pull up behind us. It was Detective Kofi and two uniformed officers. I nodded to him in the rearview mirror, giving him the signal to wait. I needed 5 minutes. I needed to look her in the eye one last time before the handcuffs clicked. I opened the front door, and Maxine was pacing in the living room wearing her silk robe, holding a glass of wine. Her eyes widened when she saw me alive and standing tall, not confused or dead in a ditch. Behind me, Candace walked in, her face a mask of grief and rage. Maxine looked past us, looking for Gavin, expecting her partner in crime to come striding in with the deed to the land. But the driveway was empty, except for the police cruiser. "Jerome, you are home," Maxine said, her voice pitching high and brittle, trembling with a fake relief that made my stomach turn. "I was so worried about you." Gavin called and said you had an episode at the restaurant. He said you were talking crazy. Is he helping you park the truck? "Gavin is not coming." "Maxine," I said. my voice flat and hard. Gavin is in handcuffs. Maxine dropped her wine glass. Red liquid splashed across the expensive cream rug, looking like a bloodstain she could never wash out. She looked at Candace, expecting her daughter to defend her husband, but Candace just stared at her mother with eyes that were cold and dead. The realization hit Maxine like a physical blow. The plan had failed. The dominoes had fallen, and she was the last one standing. She did not ask about Gavin. Well-being instead, she scrambled to save herself, transforming instantly from the worried wife into the terrified victim. "Oh, thank God," she cried, rushing toward me, her hands reaching out. "You have to believe me, Jerome. It was all him. Gavin is a monster. He forced me. He threatened me. He said if I did not help him get the land, he would hurt Candace. He made me switch your pills. He made me put those drops in your coffee. I was so scared, Jerome, I did not know what to do. I was just trying to protect our family." I stepped back, letting her hands grasp at empty air. The performance was pathetic. It was an insult to the 40 years we had spent together. She really thought I was that stupid. She thought she could rewrite history while the ink on the police report was still wet. "Stop talking, Maxine," I said quietly. My voice was not loud, but it stopped her dead in her tracks. "Stop lying. You were not forced. You were the architect. You were the one who told him to keep Candace working double shifts. You were the one who called me an old mule. You were the one who decided my life was worth less than a plot of dirt." Maxine's face crumpled, the victim act slipping. She looked at Candace, pleading. "Mommy loves you, baby. You know I would never hurt your father willingly. It was Gavin. He has a gambling problem. He is dangerous." I did not let her finish. I walked past her to the hallway closet. I opened the door and pulled out a large floral suitcase. It was already packed. I had packed it myself the morning I left before I went to the hotel. I threw it onto the floor at her feet with a heavy thud. "You are leaving, Maxine," I said. She looked at the suitcase and then at me, confusion warring with panic. "Leaving? This is my house, Jerome. You cannot kick me out. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," I said. "But before you exercise that right, I have one last thing to tell you, one last loose end. I tied up while you were busy planning my funeral." I walked over to the mantelpiece where we kept the family photos. There was a picture of me and Maxine from 20 years ago smiling on a beach. It was a lie. Even back then, I reached behind the frame and pulled out a bank statement I had folded and hidden there. "You were desperate, Maxine," I said, turning to face her. "You were desperate to sell the land fast. You pushed Gavin. You risked everything on a clumsy poisoning attempt. And I wondered why. Why was my wife, who always preached patience, suddenly in such a rush? Gavin needed money for the mob. But you, why did you need millions of dollars?" Maxine went pale. Her eyes darted to the paper in my hand. "I know about Marcus King," I said. The name hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Candace looked up, sharp confusion breaking through her grief. "Who is Marcus King?" "Ask your mother," I said, keeping my eyes locked on Maxine. "Ask her about the son she had 2 years before she met me, the son she kept secret, the son she has been sending $2,000 a month to for 20 years, using my money, using your inheritance." Maxine staggered back, clutching the back of the sofa. "You have no right. That was my past. It became my present. When you stole from me to support him, I roared. But here's the thing, Maxine. I found out about the transfers 6 months ago. I did not tell you. I did not confront you. I just went to the bank and I put a stop order on that secret account in Delaware." Maxine's eyes bulged. I cut him off, Maxine, 6 months ago. The money stopped and you did not notice because you were too busy plotting with Gavin. But Marcus noticed. I pulled another piece of paper from my pocket. It was a printout from a news website from Atlanta. "Without his allowance, your secret son got desperate. He owed money too, just like Gavin. So he tried to move a kilo of cocaine to make quick cash. He was arrested 3 days ago. Maxine, he is in federal prison, and he gave you up. He told the feds that his mother was sending him laundered money. He thinks you cut him off on purpose." Maxine let out a scream that was not human. It was the sound of a wounded animal screaming in a trap. "You killed him," she shrieked, flying at me, her nails aiming for my face. "You killed my son." I caught her wrists easily. She was weak. Her power had come from my trust. And that was gone now. "I did not kill anyone," I said, pushing her away. "I just stopped paying for his mistakes, just like I am done paying for yours." You did this, Maxine. You got greedy, you got sloppy, and now you have lost both your sons, the one you tried to kill and the one you tried to save." She stood there panting, her hair wild, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. The sweet church-going woman was gone, replaced by the monster she had always been hiding. She looked at the suitcase and then at the door. "Get out," she hissed. "This is my house. I am not going anywhere." I nodded toward the front door. "You are right. You are not going anywhere. You are going to jail." The front door opened and Kofi walked in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. The room filled with the crackle of police radios and the heavy presence of the law. "Maxine Blackwell." Kofi said, his voice stern, devoid of the friendship we once shared. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and grand larceny." Maxine looked at the handcuffs hanging from Kofi's belt. She looked at Candace, who was turning her back on her mother, refusing to even look at her. She looked at me, and she saw stone. "No," she whispered, backing away. "No, you cannot do this. I am an old woman. You are a criminal," Kofi said, stepping forward. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Maxine did not turn around. She grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the side table and hurled it at me. It smashed against the wall inches from my head, showering me with glass shards. "I hate you," she screamed as the officers grabbed her, wrestling her arms behind her back. "I hate you. You were supposed to die. You stupid old mule. You were supposed to die." They cuffed her, dragging her, kicking and screaming toward the door. Her robe was disheveled, her dignity gone. She was spitting curses, calling me every name in the book, blaming me for Marcus, blaming me for Gavin, blaming me for her own black heart. I watched them haul her out to the patrol car. The neighbors were watching again, seeing the flashing lights illuminating the downfall of the Blackwell family. I picked up the floral suitcase and walked to the porch. I threw it down the stairs. It landed on the lawn, bursting open, spilling her clothes onto the wet grass. I stood there on the porch, breathing in the cool night air. The house was quiet now. The poison was gone. The thief was gone. The liar was gone. I turned to go back inside where my daughter was waiting. The war was over. The battle for my life was won. But as I looked at the empty driveway where Maxine's car used to sit, I knew the silence in the house would be loud for a long time. I was a survivor, but I was also a widower in every way that mattered, except the paperwork. I closed the heavy oak door, shutting out the night and the flashing lights, ready to start the long, hard work of rebuilding what they had broken. The piece I thought I had won was a fragile glass ornament, and exactly 30 days after the police dragged Maxine and Gavin out of my house, that glass shattered. The morning started with a knock on the door, but it was not a neighbor or a friend. It was a process server, a young man with a bored expression who handed me a thick stack of papers and walked away without a word. I stood on the porch, the heavy oak door open behind me, and read the cover sheet. The words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. Civil lawsuit Gavin Miller and Maxine Blackwell versus Jerome Blackwell. I walked into the kitchen, my hands trembling with a rage that felt old and familiar. I sat down and read the document. The audacity of it was breathtaking. From their jail cells, my wife and son-in-law had managed to hire a shark of a defense attorney, a man named Slade who was known for turning criminals into victims. The lawsuit claimed that I was the mastermind of a sophisticated fraud. It alleged that I had faked my own mental decline to entrap them, that I had planted the arsenic myself to frame Gavin, and that I had coerced Maxine into making incriminating statements under duress. They were suing me for defamation, malicious prosecution, and emotional distress. They were demanding that the irrevocable trust be dissolved and control of the assets be returned to the marital estate immediately. They were flipping the script. They were using the very trap I had laid for them as proof of my own instability. The document painted me as a paranoid, controlling tyrant who had orchestrated an elaborate theater to destroy his family out of spite. It was a lie, a monstrous, twisted lie, but it was written in legal language that made it sound plausible. And the worst part was that they were petitioning the court to freeze all my assets pending the outcome of the litigation, alleging that I was dissipating marital funds to fund a vendetta. I called Angela Rossi immediately. Her voice was tight when she answered. "Jerome, I just saw the filing. This is a standard tactic, but it is aggressive. They are trying to starve you out. They know they cannot win on the facts, so they are trying to win on attrition. They want to force a settlement because they know legal. Battles are expensive. How expensive, I asked, looking around the kitchen that suddenly felt very empty. Very expensive, Rossi admitted. And there is a problem. The judge assigned to the civil motion is conservative. He granted the temporary freeze order. Ex parte this morning, your bank accounts are locked. Jerome, the pension, the savings, even the trust operating account. You cannot access a dime until the preliminary hearing next week. I hung up the phone and felt the silence of the house pressing in on me. They were in jail, but they were still reaching out to choke me. I went to the grocery store an hour later just to test it. I tried to buy milk and bread. The card was declined. The cashier looked at me with pity, thinking I was just another old man who had run out of money. I left the groceries on the counter and walked out. My head held high, but my stomach churning. They wanted to starve me. They wanted me to come crawling to the jail, begging for a deal so I could buy food. I drove home and went straight to the master bedroom closet. I pushed aside the rows of Maxine clothes, which still smelled like her perfume, a ghostly reminder of the enemy. I pulled up the loose floorboard in the back corner beneath the shoe rack. It was a hiding place I had built 20 years ago, a place Maxine never knew about. Inside was a mahogany box lined with velvet. I opened it. The light caught the gold and silver of my secret collection. For 30 years, every time I got a bonus, every time I made a good side deal on a logistics contract, I bought a vintage watch, a Patek Philippe from the 50s, a Rolex Submariner from the year Candace was born, a Vacheron Constantin that was worth more than my truck. It was my retirement plan, my safety net, my legacy intended for a grandson who might now grow up without a father. I looked at the watches ticking away the seconds of a life I had tried to keep private. I had to sell them. I had to liquidate the only assets the court did not know about to fight the monsters who wanted to take everything. I closed the box, feeling a physical pain in my chest. It was not just metal and gears. It was time. It was my time, and I was selling it to buy justice. I drove to the city to a high-end pawnbroker. I knew a man who asked no questions and paid in cash. I placed the mahogany box on the counter. The broker opened it and whistled low and appreciative. "This is serious hardware, Jerome," he said, picking up the Patek with a jeweler loop. "Why are you selling war chest?" I said simply. He nodded. Understanding the language of desperation, he counted out $45,000 in $100 bills. It was half of what they were worth, but I did not have the luxury of negotiation. I took the cash. Stuffing the thick envelope into my inside pocket, I felt the weight of it against my ribs. It was ammunition. I walked out of the shop into the bright sunlight, feeling lighter and heavier. At the same time, I had money to pay Rossi. I had money to keep the lights on, but I had lost another. But piece of myself. Gavin and Maxine were stripping me down layer by layer, forcing me to burn everything I had built just to survive. But they forgot one thing. A man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous man in the world. I got into my truck and threw the empty mahogany box into the back seat. I was ready for court. The preliminary hearing was held on a rainy Tuesday in a courtroom that smelled of floor wax and old misery. I sat at the plaintiff table next to Angela Rossi, wearing my best suit, looking straight ahead. Candace sat in the gallery behind me, her hand resting on my shoulder for support. She looked terrified, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting Gavin to jump out of the shadows. The side door opened and bailiffs led them in. Gavin looked thinner, his arrogance replaced by a jittery energy. Maxine looked old, her hair gray, roots showing her face drawn and bitter. They wore orange jumpsuits, but they walked with their heads up, emboldened by their new legal strategy. They did not look at me. They looked at their lawyer. Slade, a man with slicked back hair and a smile that looked like a scar. The judge banged his gavel and the nightmare began. Slade did not waste time defending their actions. He went on the offensive immediately. "Your Honor," Slade began pacing in front of the bench, his voice smooth and theatrical. "We are here today because of a tragic misunderstanding fueled by the paranoid delusions of a man with a violent history. My clients are victims of a sophisticated entrapment scheme. Jerome Blackwell is not the kindly grandfather he pretends to be." Rossi jumped up. "Objection, character assassination overruled," the judge said, looking at me over his spectacles. "I want to hear this." Slade smiled and pulled a dusty file from his briefcase. He waved it in the air like a weapon. Mr. Blackwell paints himself as a saint, a victim. But let us look at the record. In 1974, Jerome Blackwell was arrested and charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. He put 2 men in the hospital. Your Honor, this man has a history of solving his problems with violence. Is it so hard to believe that he manufactured this entire scenario to punish his family for wanting to put him in a care home? I froze. The memory of 1974 crashed into me. I was 18 years old. 2 men had cornered my sister in an alley. I had used a tire iron to get them off her. The charges were dropped when the truth came out, but the arrest record remained a ghost in the machine that I thought was buried forever. Candace gasped behind me. Daddy, is that true? I turned to look at her. I defended your Aunt Sarah, I whispered, but she looked shocked, looking at me with new doubt. Slade had planted the seed. He had turned my protection into aggression. Slade continued, relentless. He claims he was poisoned, but he has no witnesses other than a nurse he bribed with cash. Yes, Your Honor. We have evidence that Mr. Blackwell gave $5,000 cash to the nurse who drew his blood. Is that the action of an innocent man or a man buying a falsified toxicology report? The judge frowned, making a note. Rossi stood up, furious. Your Honor, that was emergency action taken by a man who was being held against his will. It looks like bribery. Slade countered smooth as oil. And as for the gun, he pulled a gun on my client at a dinner party in front of 50 witnesses, a man with a violent past waving a firearm threatening to kill his son-in-law. Does that sound like a victim to you, or does it sound like a tyrant losing control? Gavin nodded vigorously from the defense table, playing the victim perfectly. Maxine wiped a fake tear from her eye, looking small and frail. The judge looked at me, and for the first time I saw doubt in his eyes. He did not see the man who built a life. He saw a black man with an assault record, a gun, and a lot of unexplained cash. Mr. Blackwell, the judge said, his voice stern. These are serious allegations regarding your credibility. I am not going to dissolve the trust today, but I am also not going to dismiss the countersuit. There is enough here to proceed to trial, and until that trial concludes, the asset freeze remains in effect regarding the estate. You will live on a court-appointed stipend. Gavin smirked. It was small, but I saw it. He had won the round. He had dirtied my name. He had cut off my resources. He had turned the court against me. I stood up, my legs shaking, not with fear, but with the effort of holding back the explosion. Your Honor, I said, my voice deep and resonating off the wood paneling. I saved my sister in '74, and I saved myself last month. You can freeze my money, you can dig up my past, but you cannot change the fact that there is arsenic in my blood and greed in their hearts. Sit down. Mr. Blackwell, the judge barked, banging the gavel. I sat down, feeling Candace's hand tremble on my shoulder. The hearing was over. We were going to trial, and I was going into battle with one hand tied behind my back. They had taken my money. They had tarnished my name, and now they were coming for my freedom. But as I looked at Gavin's smug face, I touched the pocket where the cash from the watches sat. They thought they had cornered me. They thought the old mule was tired. They were wrong. I had been fighting since before they were born. I knew how to survive in the mud. I knew how to fight dirty. And if they wanted to bring up the past, I would show them that the past has teeth. The call from Angela Rossi came at 6 p.m, just as the sun was dipping below the tree line, casting long shadows across the property. Her voice, usually sharp and commanding, was heavy with frustration. Jerome, she said, and I knew before she finished the sentence that the system had failed us. Slade found a loophole. He argued that since the arsenic was found in your blood, but no one actually saw Gavin pouring the liquid into the cup, the physical chain of evidence was circumstantial. He argued that Maxine could have acted alone without Gavin knowing. The judge bought it. He granted bail pending the grand jury indictment. Gavin is out, Jerome. He walked out of the county jail 20 minutes ago. I sat there holding the phone, feeling the cold knot of dread tighten in my stomach. Gavin was free. He was desperate. He was humiliated, and he had nothing left to lose. A man like that does not run away. A man like that comes back to burn the world down. I hung up the phone and checked the load in my revolver. I turned off the lights in the house, plunging the rooms into darkness. I sent Candace to the guest room in the back, telling her to lock the door and stay down no matter what she heard. She argued, but she saw the look in my face and obeyed. I sat in the kitchen facing the driveway, watching through the window. The hours ticked by slowly. The silence of the countryside was usually a comfort, but tonight it felt like a held breath, waiting for the scream. Midnight came and went. Then at 2 a.m, I saw it. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness at the end of the long driveway. They turned off before they reached the gate. The car rolled to a stop just outside the property line. The engine cut out. I stood up, my joints popping, moving silently to the back door. I knew Gavin. He was a coward. He would not come to the front door where I might be waiting. He would come to the back. He would try to hurt me where I felt safe. I slipped out onto the back porch, the night air cool against my skin. I moved into the shadows of the old oak tree, merging with the darkness. I heard footsteps, soft crunching on the dry leaves. Gavin appeared from around the corner of the detached garage. He was wearing dark clothes, but I recognized his walk, that arrogant stride that even jail had not beaten out of him. He was carrying something heavy in his right hand. It sloshed as he walked, a gas can. He was not coming for me. He was heading toward the old wooden barn that stood 50 yards from the main house. My heart stopped. That barn was not just wood and nails. It was my sanctuary. It was where I kept 40 years of journals. It was where I stored the original land grant documents from 1890 that proved my great-grandfather owned this earth. It was where I kept the photo albums of Candace growing up, the only copies that existed. Gavin stopped in front of the barn doors. I saw the flicker of a lighter in his hand, the small flame dancing in the dark. He poured the gasoline, splashing it over the dry wood of the doors. He was laughing, a low, manic sound that carried on the wind. He wanted to erase me. He wanted to burn my history, because he could not steal my future. I raised my gun, but he was too close to the wood. If I shot and missed, the spark could still ignite the fumes. I started to run, my boots pounding against the earth. Gavin turned, hearing me, but it was too late. He dropped the lighter. The world exploded into orange and red. The fumes ignited with a whoosh that knocked me backward. The fire climbed the dry wood of the barn, instantly hungry and roaring. Gavin stumbled back, shielding his face from the heat, scrambling away from the inferno he had created. I did not chase him. I ran toward the fire. The heat was intense, singeing the hair on my arms. The smoke was thick and black, choking the air. But I could not let it burn. I could not let him take the memory of my ancestors. I kicked the side door open, my shoulder screaming in protest. The inside of the barn was filling with smoke. Rapidly, I dropped to my knees, crawling under the gray cloud. I knew exactly where the metal strongbox was. It was on the bottom shelf of the workbench in the corner. The fire was licking at the rafters above me, glowing like the eyes of demons. I reached the workbench. My lungs burned. My eyes watered so bad I was blind. I felt around frantically, feeling saws and hammers until my fingers brushed the cold steel of the box. I grabbed the handle. The metal was hot, searing my palm, but I did not let go. I pulled it to my chest, shielding it with my body. A beam crashed down behind me, sending a shower of sparks raining onto my back. My shirt caught fire. I rolled on the dirt floor, smothering the flames, coughing until I tasted blood. I had the box. I had the history. I scrambled back toward the door, dragging the heavy box with me. The heat was unbearable. It felt like the skin was peeling off my face. I tumbled out into the cool night air, gasping for oxygen, clutching the box like a newborn baby. The barn was fully engulfed now, a tower of flame reaching for the stars. I dragged myself away from the heat, collapsing on the grass, my chest heaving. I looked down at the box. It was scorched, but intact. I had saved them. Then I heard the engine roar. I looked up through the smoke. Gavin was running toward the rental car he had left near the gate. He was escaping. He was going to get away again. He was going to vanish into the night and leave me with the ashes. I tried to stand up, but my legs gave out. The smoke inhalation had sapped my strength. I watched helplessly as he reached the car, fumbling with the door handle. He jumped in, and the headlights flared on, cutting through the smoke. He slammed the car into gear. Tires spinning on the gravel. He was going to make it. He was going to drive away and leave me burning. Then I saw a second pair of headlights. They came from the side of the house, roaring with the deep-throated growl of a V8 engine. It was my old Ford F-150. The truck Gavin had laughed at. The truck he called a piece of junk. The truck I had taught Candace to drive when she was 16. The truck accelerated across the lawn, tearing up the grass, heading on a collision course with the driveway exit. Gavin saw it coming. He honked the horn, swerving to try and get around, but the truck did not swerve. It slammed into the side of Gavin's rental car with a metal crunching impact that shook the ground. The Ford heavy steel frame plowed into the sedan, pushing it sideways, skidding across the gravel until it pinned Gavin's car against the thick trunk of the oak. Tree steam hissed from the radiator of the sedan. The driver's side door was crushed, entrapping Gavin inside. The Ford backed up a few feet, its grille mangled but its engine still running strong, blocking the only exit. The driver door of the truck opened. Candace stepped out. She was wearing her pajamas, her feet bare on the gravel. She was shaking, but she did not look scared. She looked furious. She looked like the daughter of Jerome Blackwell. She walked over to the pinned car, picking up a heavy tire iron from the bed of the truck as she passed. She stood in front of Gavin's window, raising the iron. Gavin was screaming inside the car, banging on the glass, his face bloody from the airbag deployment. Candace smashed the window with one swing, shattering the glass. "You are not going anywhere!" she screamed, her voice rising above the roar of the fire. "You are not leaving this driveway until you pay for what you did." I watched from the grass, clutching the metal box to my chest, tears cutting tracks through the soot on my face. My barn was burning. My body was broken, but my daughter had finally found her strength. She had used the tool I gave her to stop the man who tried to break us. The sirens were coming now, real sirens, loud and urgent, but I did not need them to save me anymore. My daughter had already done that. The red and blue lights of the emergency vehicles painted the smoke-filled night in chaotic flashes, turning the scene of my burning barn into a surreal nightmare. The fire department arrived first, their hoses blasting water onto the inferno, battling to keep the flames from spreading to the house. Gavin was still screaming inside his crushed rental car, pinned against the oak tree by the heavy steel frame of my truck. He was not screaming from pain. He was screaming from the realization that his life was over. I stood in the grass, clutching the metal box of family records, while Candace stood guard over the wreckage, holding the tire iron like a warrior queen. When the police, officers rushed forward, guns drawn, Gavin tried to spin one last desperate lie. He pointed a shaking finger at Candace and yelled, "She is crazy! She tried to kill me! She ran me off the road! Arrest her!" But the evidence was shouting louder than he was. The officers pulled him from the wreckage, and the smell of gasoline coming off his clothes was strong enough to make them gag. He was soaked in it. Next to the car, lying in the grass where he had dropped it, was the red gas can. His fingerprints were on the handle. His lighter was on the ground by the barn door. This was not a misunderstanding. This was arson. This was attempted murder. This was a violation of his bail conditions so flagrant that no judge in the state would let him walk free again. I watched as they cuffed him, dragging him away from the fire. He looked at me, his eyes wild and pleading, seeking mercy from the man he had tried to burn alive. "Pop, tell them. Tell them. I was just trying to keep warm." He babbled, his mind snapping under the pressure. I walked up to him, the soot masking the burns on my arms. I leaned in close so only he could hear. "You are going to be warm where you are going, son," I said, my voice raspy from the smoke. "Hell is hot." They shoved him into the back of the patrol car, slamming the door on his screams. This time there would be no bail. This time there would be no loopholes. Gavin Miller was going to die in a cage. Candace dropped the tire iron and collapsed into my arms, sobbing against my chest. We stood there watching the firefighters drown the last of the flames, turning my history into wet black charcoal. The barn was gone, but we were still standing. The cancer had been cut out, and now the healing could begin. Later that night, I sat on the edge of a hospital bed while a nurse applied cooling gel to the second-degree burns on my arms and neck. The pain was a sharp, constant stinging, but it kept me focused. Candace sat in the chair next to me, holding a cup of bad hospital coffee. Her hands still trembling, she looked small and frightened, the adrenaline of the night fading to reveal the terrifying reality of our situation. "Daddy," she whispered, staring into her cup. "What are we going to do? The barn is gone. The house is a crime scene. Gavin left me with thousands of dollars in debt, and the lawyers said the trust locks up the land so we cannot sell it. We are broke, Daddy. How are we going to pay for this hospital visit? How are we going to pay the mortgage?" I looked at my daughter, seeing the fear that had been driving her for years, the fear that Gavin had exploited to control her. She thought we were destitute. She thought we were just a retired warehouse manager and a nurse scraping by. I waved the nurse away, asking for a moment of privacy. When the door clicked shut, I reached out and took Candace's hand. "We are not broke, baby girl," I said, my voice steady. She looked at me with pity. "Daddy, I know you have a pension, I know you have savings, but Gavin debts are huge, and the legal fees?" I squeezed her hand, silencing her. "Candace, listen to me, I lied to you." She froze, looking hurt. "You lied?" "I lied to everyone," I said. "For 40 years I told you and your mother that I was a warehouse manager, and that was true. But 20 years ago, the owner of the logistics company, Mr. Henderson, wanted to retire. He liked me. He trusted me. He knew I ran that floor better than anyone, so he offered me a deal. A buy-in." Candace frowned. "I do not understand. I bought into the company, Candace. I put every extra dime I made into buying shares when the company was small. We expanded. We went regional, then national. When the company was acquired by a global conglomerate 5 years ago, my shares converted. I did not just retire. Candace, I cashed out." I watched the comprehension slowly dawn on her face. "I am not just a pensioner," I said. "I am a silent partner in one of the largest logistics firms in the Southeast." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I do not have a few $1,000s in savings. Candace, my liquid assets portfolio is worth just over $10 million. The cup slipped from her hands, spilling coffee on the floor. She did not even notice. $10 million, she whispered. "I kept it quiet because I wanted a simple life," I explained. "I wanted to know who loved me for me and not for my wallet. I saw what money did to people. I saw what the lack of it did to Gavin. But I never intended for you to suffer." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the phone I had retrieved from the truck. I opened my banking app and handed it to her. "Look." She looked at the screen. Her eyes went wide, scanning the numbers, the zeros that seemed to go on forever. "We are not broke," I repeated. "We are free. I can pay off Gavin debts with a signature. I can buy you a new house tomorrow. I can build 10 new barns if I want to." The land in the trust was never about money. It was about heritage. The money. Candace. The real money is right here. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "You let me work double shifts. You let me worry. I am sorry," I said, and I meant it. I thought I was teaching you value. But I see now I was just letting you struggle. I will never let you struggle again, baby girl. You are the heir to all of this. Not Gavin, not Maxine. You, Candace, dropped her head onto the bed, weeping softly. But these were not tears of fear anymore. They were tears of relief. The weight of the world had just been lifted off her shoulders. We sat there in the sterile light of the hospital room, 2 survivors who had just discovered that we won the lottery. 3 days later, I was back home sitting on the porch staring at the charred remains of the barn. The air still smelled of smoke, but the birds were singing, unaware of the violence that had happened here. The mailman drove up and handed me a single envelope. It was from the county jail. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was neat, cursive loops, the same handwriting that had been in the ledger, noting payments to Marcus King. It was from Maxine. I sat there holding the envelope, feeling the weight of 40 years of lies. I opened it carefully, extracting the single sheet of lined yellow paper. "My dearest Jerome," it began. I almost laughed. The audacity. "I am writing this from my cell. It is cold here, and the food is terrible. I miss my home. I miss you, Jerome. I know you are angry, and you have every right to be, but please understand, I was manipulated. Gavin twisted my mind. He made me think we were in danger. He made me do those things. I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to secure our retirement. I read on my eyes, narrowing. I know about the fire. I saw it on the news. I am so glad you are safe. Whatever Gavin did, I had no part in it. Please, Jerome, I need bail." The judge set it at $100,000. "I know you can find the money. You always find a way. Please get me out of here and we can talk. We can fix this. I am your wife. I love you, Maxine." She did not know. She still thought I was the poor warehouse manager scraping together pennies. She thought she could charm me, manipulate me, use my sense of duty to get her out. I stood up and walked into the house to the kitchen. I placed the letter in the sink. I took my phone and started recording a video. I focused the camera on the letter, zooming in on the words, "I love you." Then I took a match, the same kind of match I used to light my pipe on Sundays, and I struck it. I held the flame to the corner of the yellow paper. The fire caught quickly, curling the edges, turning her lies into black ash. I watched the words burn. I watched her pleas for money disappear into smoke. I watched the last connection to my wife disintegrate. When the letter was nothing but dust, I turned the camera on myself. "Hello, Maxine," I said to the lens, my voice cold and final. "I got your letter. I just wanted to let you know that bail is not in the budget, and neither are you. Do not write again. The Jerome you knew died the day you put poison in his cup. The man who is left has no wife." I stopped the recording. I sent the video file to her lawyer with a simple subject line: "Reply to client." I washed the ashes down the drain, watching the gray sludge swirl away, disappearing into the dark pipes. It was over. She was gone. Gavin was gone. The lies were gone. I walked back out to the porch and sat down. Candace was pulling into the driveway in a brand new car I had bought for her cash that morning. She waved at me, smiling a real smile. For the first time in years, I waved back. The barn was gone, but the foundation of the house was strong. And now, for the first time in a long time, the foundation of my family was solid rock. The red clay of Georgia stained my boots, a deep rusty color that looked like dried blood. But for the first time in months, it did not remind me of violence. It reminded me of life. I stood on the hill overlooking the 300 acres that had almost cost me my life. The air smelled of pine needles and wet earth, a clean scent that washed away the lingering odor of smoke and hospital antiseptics. Beside me, Candace held a shovel, her hands no longer trembling, her face set in a line of determination that mirrored my own. We were not here to sell. We were here to build. The heavy machinery was already idling down by the creek. Huge yellow bulldozers and excavators ready to carve out the foundation for the Blackwell Community Center. It was going to be a place for the local kids, a place with a library, a tech lab, and a trade school where they could learn skills that could not be taken away. It was my answer to Gavin Greed. He wanted a casino to destroy lives. I was building a school to save them. I watched Candace drive the shovel into the earth, breaking the ground. It was a symbolic gesture, but it felt heavy with meaning. She was dressed in work boots and jeans, looking nothing like the woman who had worn silver dresses to drink champagne with loan sharks. She wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of dirt across her brow, and she smiled. It was a small, hesitant smile, but it was real. I walked over to the site, over to manager, a man I had hired because he looked me in the eye and shook my hand with a grip that meant business. "We start today," I told him. "Pour the foundation. Deep, I want this building to stand for 100 years, he nodded, touching the brim of his hard hat. "It will stand, Mr. Blackwell. We will make sure of that." I looked back at the property line where the timberline met the sky. I thought about the deed, the piece of paper that Gavin had tried to steal. It was safe now, locked in the trust, managed by Angela Rossi. No one could touch it, no one could leverage it, and most importantly, no one could die for it. The roar of the diesel engine starting up filled the valley, scaring a flock of crows out of the pines. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the dust of my ancestors. This land had been fought for, it had been bled for, and now finally it was going to work for us, not against us. I watched the first bucket of earth being lifted, and I felt the last of the poison leaving my spirit. I was not a victim anymore. I was a builder. And I was building something that no fire could burn down. Later that afternoon, the noise of the construction site faded as the crew broke for lunch. I found Candace sitting on the tailgate of my new truck, staring at her hands. She was crying silent tears that tracked through the red dust on her cheeks. She looked small again, like the little girl who used to scrape her knees running in the driveway. I walked over and leaned against the truck bed beside her. "What is it, baby girl?" I asked, handing her a bottle of water. She did not take it. She kept staring at her hands, her fingers picking at a loose thread on her jeans. "I should go, Daddy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I cannot do this, cannot do what I asked. I cannot be here." She looked up at me, and her eyes were full of a pain that broke my heart. "I do not deserve this. I do not deserve to be part of your legacy. I helped him, Daddy. I defended him when you tried to warn me. I called you jealous. I called you bitter. I let him into our lives and he almost killed you. Every time I look at this land, I see my own stupidity. I see how close I came to letting him win. I listened to her, letting her pour out the poison. The guilt was eating her alive, telling her she was unworthy, telling her she was just like her mother. I deserve to be cut off, she continued sobbing. Now, I deserve to be left with nothing, just like Mom. You should send me away. You should find someone else to run this center, someone who did not betray you. I took her chin in my hand, forcing her to look at me. The sun was high and bright, exposing every flaw and every truth. Listen to me, Candace. I said, my voice low and firm. You are not your mother, and you are not your husband. You were a victim just like me. You were manipulated by a master liar and betrayed by the woman who gave birth to you. That does not make you bad, it makes you human. But I was blind, she cried. We were all blind, I corrected her. I lived with that woman for 40 years, and I did not see the knife until it was at my throat. Does that make me stupid? Does that make me unworthy? She shook her head. No, Daddy, you are the smartest man I know. Then trust me now, I said, releasing her chin. Guilt is a useless emotion, Candace. It is a luxury we cannot afford. It does not fix the barn, it does not pay the bills, and it sure as hell does not build community centers. You want to make it right, you do not run away. Running away is what Gavin did. You stay, you work. You take that guilt and you turn it into sweat. I pointed to the construction site where the men were returning to work. You are going to manage this project, I said. You are going to handle the accounts. You are going to hire the staff. You are going to make sure every dime is spent on these kids. That is your penance. That is how you pay me back. Not with tears, but with bricks and mortar. Candace looked at the site, wiping her eyes. She took a deep breath, straightening her back. I could see the steel in her spine, the steel she got from me. I am scared, she admitted. Good, I said. Fear keeps you sharp. Fear keeps you honest. Now drink your water. We have work to do. She took the bottle and drank. I watched her stand up, dusting off her jeans. She looked different, stronger. She was not the girl who needed a husband to define her value. She was the woman who was going to build a future. Just as we were about to head back to the site, a black sedan turned off the main road and crunched slowly down the gravel driveway toward us. It was not a local car. It had out-of-state plates. I felt my hand instinctively move to my waist, checking for the revolver I still carried. Old habits die hard, and I was not taking chances. The car stopped 20 feet away. The driver door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, light-skinned, with a build that suggested he had spent time lifting weights in a yard. He wore a simple suit that looked cheap but neat. He held his hands out to his sides, showing me they were empty. Jerome Blackwell, he asked, his voice deep and cautious. I stepped in front of Candace, shielding her. Who is asking? The man walked forward slowly, stopping when he saw my hand on my belt. He looked at me and I saw a resemblance that made my stomach turn. He had Maxine eyes. My name is Marcus King, he said. The name hit me like a physical blow. This was him, the secret son. The reason my accounts had been drained for 20 years. The reason my wife had turned into a monster. I tensed, ready for a fight. I thought he had come for money. I thought he had come to finish what his mother started. You have a lot of nerve showing up here, I growled, taking a step forward. I thought the feds had you. I made a deal, Marcus said, keeping his hands visible. I gave them the supply chain. They gave me probation and time served. I am not here for trouble. Mr. Blackwell, then what are you here for? I asked, my anger boiling. I cut off the money. Marcus, the well is dry. Go tell your mother she failed. I know, Marcus said. He looked down at the red dirt. Ashamed. I know what she did. I know. She tried to kill you. I saw it on the news. I saw the stream. He reached into his jacket pocket. I drew my gun, leveling it at his chest. Slowly I warned. He moved with agonizing slowness, pulling out a thick white envelope. He did not hold it like a weapon. He held it like an offering. He walked forward and placed it on the hood of my truck, then backed away. I did not know where the money was coming from, he said, his voice cracking. I thought she was rich. I thought it was family money. She told me my father left it for me. I did not know she was stealing it from a working man. I did not know she was bleeding you dry. I looked at the envelope, then at him. What is this? I asked. It is not much, Marcus said. It is everything I have left. It is $50,000. It is what she sent me the last 2 years. I did not spend it all. I was saving it for a house, but I cannot keep it. Not now. Not knowing it almost cost you your life." He looked at Candace, then back at me. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never wanted to be the reason a family died. I just wanted to know my mother, but I guess I never really knew her at all." I lowered the gun. The rage in my chest cooled, replaced by a strange, heavy sadness. This man was a victim too. He was just another pawn in Maxine's game. "You do not have to do this," I said, looking at the money. "Yes, I do," Marcus replied, buttoning his jacket. "It is the only way I can sleep. Take it, build something with it, do some good." He turned and walked back to his car. He did not look back. He got in and drove away, dust billowing behind him, leaving me standing there with $50,000 of my own stolen money, returned by a stranger who had more honor than my own wife. I picked up the envelope. It felt heavy. I looked at Candace. She was staring at the retreating car, her mouth open. "He gave it back," she whispered. I nodded, tucking the envelope into my pocket. "He gave it back," I said, looking at the construction site. It was a strange world, a world where your son-in-law tries to kill you and a stranger tries to make you whole. But as I watched the dust settle, I knew one thing for sure. The cycle was broken. The lies were over and the rebuilding had truly begun. 2 years have passed since the fire. 2 years since the sirens faded into the night, leaving behind the charred skeleton of my barn and the ruins of the family I thought I had. Time has a way of smoothing over the rough edges of memory like a river stone polished by the current. But it does not erase the scars, it just teaches you how to live with them. The Georgia sun is hot today, baking the red clay dust that coats my truck. But here on the porch of the new house I built, the shade is cool and the iced tea is sweet. It is a different kind of sweet than the one Maxine used to make. This one. I made myself sugar, lemon, and water, no poison, no lies, just the simple, honest taste of survival. I look out over the valley, and I do not see empty timberland anymore. I see the Blackwell community center bustling with life. The building is magnificent steel and glass rising out of the earth like a testament to stubbornness. The parking lot is full of cars, beaten-up sedans, and work trucks belonging to parents who are inside watching their children learn how to code, how to weld, how to build a life that does not depend on handouts. I hear the faint sound of a basketball bouncing on the new outdoor courts, and the laughter of children who will never know my name, but will walk on the ground. I fought to keep for them. It is a good view. It is the view of a victory that cost me everything and gave me back more than I lost. But even in paradise, you cannot forget where the devils are kept, 300 miles away in a gray concrete box surrounded by razor wire. Gavin Miller is waking up to another day of hell. I get updates from Kofi every few months, unofficial reports from the guards who know guards. The first 6 months were the hardest for him, the men he owed money to the sharks who sat at my table and ate my steak. They did not forget their debt. They could not get the money, so they took payment in flesh. Gavin walks with a permanent limp now, a reminder of a fall in the shower that no one saw and everyone heard. He lost 2 teeth in a dispute over a food tray. He spends his days in protective custody, isolated and terrified, looking at the steel door and wondering if today is the day the lock fails. He wanted to be a big man. He wanted to play with the heavy hitters. Now he is just currency passed around by men who have nothing to lose. He sends letters to Candace, sometimes scribbled on prison stationery, begging for money for commissary, begging for forgiveness. She burns them unopened just like I taught her. And Maxine, my dear sweet Maxine, who sat in the pew every Sunday and plotted my murder by Tuesday. She is not in prison, not exactly. Her lawyer managed to plead her down, citing her age and health, but the victory was hollow. She is in a state-funded nursing facility, 3 counties over. It is the kind of place she used to turn her nose up at, the kind of place that smells of boiled cabbage and industrial cleaner. The walls are beige, the floors are sticky, and the staff is overworked. I pay for nothing. The state takes her small pension and gives her a bed and 3 meals a day. She has a window, but it looks out onto a brick wall. She spends her days sitting in a wheelchair. She does not really need telling anyone who will listen that she is wealthy, that her husband is coming to get her, that there was a terrible mistake. The nurses just nod and give her a sedative. She is alone, trapped in the prison of her own mind, surrounded by the mediocrity she despised. I do not visit. I do not call. She wanted a life where she did not have to care for me, and I granted her wish. She is completely free of me. I take a sip of my tea and listen to the screen door creak open behind me. It is Candace. She is holding a tablet reviewing the budget for the new trade school wing. We are expanding. Again. She looks different now. The dark circles are gone, replaced by the glow of a woman who knows her worth. She cut her hair short, wearing it natural, and she traded the scrubs for blazers. She runs the foundation with an iron fist, managing the $10 million endowment better than any Wall Street broker could. I see her arguing with contractors, checking invoices, making sure every penny is accounted for. She is not the girl who begged me for $20,000. She is the woman who signs the checks. "Hey, Daddy," she says, sitting in the rocking chair next to me. "Tyler is asking if you want to go fishing down at the creek later." I smile, thinking of my grandson. He is 10 now, tall for his age. He knows the truth. We did not hide it from him. We told him his father was a bad man who made bad choices. We told him his grandmother got sick in her soul. We taught him that character is not inherited, it is built. He does not ask about them anymore. He asks about the land, he asks about the business, he asks. Ask me to teach him how to drive the tractor, tell him to get the poles ready, I say. I will be down in 10 minutes. Candace smiles and goes back inside, leaving me alone with the evening breeze. I put my glass down on the side table and open the drawer built into the arm of my custom rocking chair. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, is my Smith & Wesson revolver. It is clean, oiled, and fully loaded. I do not carry it on my hip anymore. I do not sleep with it under my pillow. But it is always within reach. Some people say you should forgive and forget. They say you should let go of the weapons of war once the peace treaty is signed. But those people never woke up to a poisoned cup of coffee. Those people never watched their barn burn with their history inside them. I have forgiven myself for being blind for 40 years. I have forgiven Candace for being young and foolish, but I have not forgotten. I run my thumb over the cold steel of the barrel. I do not trust blindly anymore. I do not let people let into my inner circle without checking their pockets first. The warehouse manager in me is back, the man who counts every box and checks every seal. I am generous. Yes, I give scholarships, I build schools, I help neighbors, but I keep the gate locked. I look out at the sun setting over the Georgia pines, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. It is beautiful, it is mine. They called me a mule. They thought I was a beast of burden, stupid and slow fit, only to carry their load until I dropped dead. But they forgot that the mule is the one who knows the path. They forgot that the mule can carry the weight that breaks the thoroughbred. And they forgot that when the mule plants his feet, there is no force on earth that can move him. I am Jerome Blackwell. I am 70 years old. I am a father, a grandfather, and a survivor. They tried to take my mind, and I outsmarted them. They tried to take my life, and I outlived them. They tried to burn my legacy, and I built a monument on the ashes. I closed the drawer, hiding the gun but knowing it is there, waiting just in case the wolves ever come back, but they won't come back because the wolves know, now that this sheepdog has teeth. I pick up my cane, not because I need it, but because I like the way it feels in my hand, heavy and solid hickory wood. I stand up, my knees protesting a little but holding my weight. I walk down the steps toward the creek where my grandson is waiting to learn how to fish. The past is dead buried in a prison cell and a nursing home. The future is waiting by the water, holding a fishing pole and laughing. I walk toward it, leaving the shadow of the porch behind, stepping into the light of the evening sun. A free man, a rich man, and finally a man who can drink his coffee in peace without tasting the copper of betrayal. This is my land. This is my blood. And this is my legacy. And God help anyone who tries to touch it again. I learned that family is not defined by the blood in your veins, but by the loyalty in your actions. For 40 years, I confused blindness with trust, thinking that love meant sacrificing my dignity for people who only saw me as a resource. But I discovered that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones sleeping in your house. True wealth isn't just the millions in the bank or the land in the trust. It is the peace that comes from knowing your worth and having the courage to cut out the rot no matter how much it hurts. It is never too late to restart your life, to demand respect, and to build a legacy that stands on the solid rock of truth rather than the shifting sands of lies. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, justice, and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And let me know in the comments, do you think I was right to give Candace a second chance, or should I have cut her off like the others? I read every single comment. See you in the next story.